IB Nation, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is finally here, everybody, after a long off season. It is officially game week. It is Monday, August 25th, and that means we are 6 days away from Notre Dame kicking off the 2025 season against the Miami Hurricanes, the rivalry renewed. And I was thinking to myself, what better way to kick off game week for Miami than to bring back someone who was not only an Irish legend, not only an All-American, not only a national champion, but somebody that was there when this matchup between two schools became the rivalry that we know it. And that's why I am joined today by Chris Zorich, former Notre Dame star, All-American, second-round draft pick of the Chicago Bears. And obviously had a NFL career to be proud of, but we care about the Notre Dame career, and we wanted to have you on today. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today.
Brian, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And a special shout out to Mike Slade for organizing this.
My man, awesome. Mike. Yes, I really appreciate that. And he hit me up about 2 weeks ago, and he was like, hey, would you like to have Zorich on the show? And I was like, I don't know if I even let him finish the sentence before I started saying yes. So I'd love to have Chris Zorich on the show. But
for those folks who may not know who Mike Slade is, he is the fantasy camp extraordinaire quarterback. That last fantasy camp, I think he may have had 2 touchdowns. I know he had one. Mm-hmm. He may have had 2 touchdown passes. So you guys got to look him up. Check out fantasy camp, Mike Slade.
He didn't even play quarterback in high school. He was a tight end in high school. He was a pitcher. He was a pitcher, right?
Guy, exactly.
Became a quarterback much later in life. So
yes. I just want to give him a little shout out.
So. Yeah, that's my guy. I'm always welcome to. First time I met Mike was actually at the Fiesta Bowl in 2015. Nice. First time I met him in person, like we had known each other. First time I met him in person was the Fiesta Bowl in 2015. So I got a chance to meet him and his wife, and Mike is a great guy, and I really appreciate him putting it together because, Chris, we wanted to talk about this matchup, and we want to talk about Notre Dame Miami, and we're going to spend all week kind of breaking down the X's and O's and the matchups of this particular game. But I think this game, of all the games in the schedule, I think this game has a uniqueness to it because of just this rivalry between Notre Dame and Miami. It's not a long one. It's not a big one. They've only played, I think, 27 games. Notre Dame holds an 18-8-1 advantage in the game, and they played 4 times in the Brian Kelly era or 3 times in the Brian Kelly era, and they weren't games that were necessarily great games. The 2010 Sun Bowl was a blowout. They played again in 2012, and it was a blowout. They played in 2016. That was the only really close game that they had. Notre Dame's 4-8 year included a win over 9-win Miami, so they'll always have that season. And then, of course, Miami got a little payback the next year in 2017. And those 4 games was really the first time they played since the last time you played against your senior year when you guys played against Miami at home, won 29-20. And this is a rivalry, I think, Chris, it's unlike a lot of other rivalries because it doesn't have the long history of playing since the 40s and all these games. But I don't know that, along with Michigan, it might be the most heated rivalry when it was really burning hot. It was burning hot. And that's why I wanted to have you on to just really dive into the uniqueness of this rivalry, but then also the role that you and your team played in it becoming a rivalry. Because you and I talked before the show, Chris, it wasn't really like a rivalry until that era when you were part of the team and you guys had those great games from 88 to 90.
Right. And I was doing a little research, and they played a ton in the 70s and 80s, and it was kind of going back and forth a little bit. But the interesting thing is, I think folks remember, I think it was 58-7 one year. I think that was like 86 or something like that.
Yeah, it was Coach Faust's last game at Notre Dame. It was 1985. Yes.
And I think folks remember that. But then my freshman year, I didn't play at all. and I think we wound up beating Miami. I forgot what the score was, or maybe we lost. I'm not sure.
They beat you guys 24-0. It was
Gotcha,
down. It
gotcha,
was down in Miami in '87.
gotcha. So now you're looking at 57 or 57. That terrible score. You're looking at the one in '87, and it's so funny because I know the Miami team didn't think a lot of us. Um, but it was so interesting because we have folks like Pat Terrell, Todd Light, folks like Mike Stonebreaker, who literally had friends who played for Miami. Pat Terrell, he lived in the area. I think Pat even took a visit to Miami. We had Pierre Martin. We had a lot of guys on the team who knew folks, and I in particular, Mike Sullivan. He was a offensive guard, I think. He wound up playing at St. Francis de Sales. We played against each other in high school. Russell, Maryland went to Whitney Young, which is also public school in Chicago, which is my era. So I knew a lot of these guys, as did everybody else. And so we knew, yes, it was an important game, but it was more of like, hey, we're playing our peers. And so we hadn't experienced like the huge loss of Faustus last year. So for us, it was going to be just another game. And when you look at our schedule at the time, I mean, it was kind of like right in the middle. And
Mm-hmm.
so it wasn't like, hey, we had the game circled. We played Michigan and almost lost the game that year. So every game was important, but it wasn't until after that game that really set in and say, hey, you know what? We we really belong, because Miami, they actually won it in '86. They won the national championship in '86. No, I'm sorry, '87. We won it in '88, and they won it again in '89. So they're upset with us, obviously, because we kind of took that away from them in '88. But then we had a chance to win it in '89, which I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about as well.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting, and I've brought this up on my show before, Chris, is from 1987 to 1991, Miami won 3 titles. The only 2 years that they didn't win it in that stretch are years where you guys beat them in '88 and '90. They won it in '87, they won it in '89, and then they won it again in 1991 with Dennis Erickson, obviously. And so it's really interesting when you go back and look at it, because when you guys played Miami in 1990, they began the season with a loss to BYU, but then obviously did what Miami does, and they started rolling again. They beat number
Right.
2 Florida State 2 weeks before they played you guys. And when they came to Notre Dame, you were 6 and they were 2. So they beat you guys number 6 on the road. They're right back in it. They went
Right.
out, they're national champions again, but it was that loss to you guys that sort of knocked them out of that. So that's the era where this thing became a rivalry. Because to your point, leading into that game in 1988, Miami had beaten Notre Dame 4 straight times, and the closest game was 20-0
Right.
in
Right.
1983. And so they had really and Notre Dame had dominated the rivalry up until that point in time. Like back, you talked about like the 70s, Miami wasn't very good. It wasn't really until Howard Schnellenberger came in and
Right.
turned that program around that Miami started taking it to a lot of people. And then you guys obviously changed the things in 1988. You talk about the placement of the schedule. It was right in the middle. You were correct. It was right in the middle. You had Michigan at the beginning, and there was 5 games, including that. Then after that, there was 5 games that ended with a road game at number 2 USC. So it was that middle point in the season that this game took place. And, you know, we've all watched the different documentaries and shows about what made that team special. But I was kind of curious about the role that Miami game had in the evolution of that team, to where it's like, okay, now that you said it's just another game. I know you guys have, all your team has talked about how coach was that week. But what was it like when you going into that game? Like what caused, I mean, we all know, we see the brawl, we see all that kind of stuff and in the tunnel, but where did it come from? Was it more about the rivalry, or was it more about just you guys saying, hey, no, we're Notre Dame, we'll know what you did before, but things are a little bit different now? Like, where did that come from, that intensity come from for that game?
Well, I think a lot of it was we had so many young players playing that they didn't experience like the Faust loss, right? And we were talented. I find out later that it took kind of an amalgamation of everything kind of getting together, because you had to have those old guys who were kind of these leaders that went through the really hard times, and then you kind of had a mixture of younger players who really didn't give a crap that Miami was, who they were. I mean, obviously we all remember Miami walking off the airplane in fatigues, which, I think was freaking awesome. But as an athletic director, you look at that and go, oh my God, you're pulling out your hair. But as a player, as a young kid, you're like, oh, that's so awesome. So they had this great reputation, and they came to our house. And again, I mean, I don't want to stress this enough. We looked at it as another game. And I'm not speaking for everybody, but it was, I mean, at that point, we were, what you said was the fifth game of the year?
It was 6, so it was like
Okay, I'm
5
sorry,
before,
six.
5
So,
after. It was like
so
right
we're,
in
we're
the middle.
5-0, and not necessarily, hey, if we win this game, we're going to win the national championship. It was just another game. And so, I mean, there's a lot of hype around it. We didn't know anything about the Catholic versus Converts T-shirt or anything like that. So a lot of the play, I mean, we were focused, we were dialed in, but it was just another good opponent. Now, mind you, Holtz also got us pumped up to play Navy and Rice as well. So, it was kind of one of those things where, yes, this is going to be another game, but it wasn't until after that game that we realized, hey, we may have done something really huge here. And then another win and another win. I mean, if we would have won that game but lost to our next opponent or lost to USC, then, no one's having a conversation about us winning a national championship. So for us at the time, going up to it, like there wasn't any special practices we had during that week of practice. I mean, again, it was kind of going through their personnel. But I think we surprised Miami when they were walking through our calisthenics. I mean, I'm sure everybody, you have a football field behind you, but basically in the backdrop, we were doing our cals. They kind of walked through us. We want to kind of having that big confrontation right there. You go, right in the tunnel. And I think that's one of they were surprised that we're like fighting back. They were surprised that we're yelling and swearing and kind of pushing them, throwing punches back. And I think that kind of surprised them. And one of the things I remember Ned Bolkar was saying as we're going into the locker room that they were mocking our fight song. So then we go into the locker room and everybody's all pumped up. And then, Lou gives this great speech. I don't remember any of it, but I do remember at the end, and this is the kind of the famous quote he had was, we're going to go out there and kick their ass, and you saved Jimmy Johnson's ass for me. Now, Jimmy Johnson actually played college football.
D tackle.
There you go. And Holtz may have played.
He was on a team.
Or
he was on a team.
I mean, he was on a roster somewhere. Accurate. I'm not sure where, but he actually was on he was on a team. He was on a roster somewhere. So had they went behind the woodshed, I'm pretty sure Jimmy Johnson would have decimated Lou Holtz. But
I'm glad you said that. I said it last week. I said, guys, Jimmy Johnson was a starting D tackle on a 1964 Arkansas national championship team. And we all love Lou Holtz, but Lou Holtz wasn't taking Jimmy Johnson in a fight, if we're being honest. But it worked.
At the time, Lou Holtz is 100 pounds soaking wet. I mean, he sure as hell had me terrified of him. And he never really swore. So for him to say, you saved Jimmy Johnson's ass, I mean, we were like, okay, this is it. And then we went out on that field and played like we had never played before. I mean, it was back and forth, and every down counted, and I mean, I remember some plays where I remember watching some videos on it. I mean, it was a great game. It was so electric, and somebody, I think last year, somebody sent me like Brent Musburger's intro to the game, and it was hyped up, and all the little old school graphics they had. I mean, it was just a great game leading up into it, and then having the chance to be part of it. But again, not knowing how important it was. I mean, we weren't kind of in the game at third and fourth, going, okay, hey, this if we don't do this, we win the national championship. It just kind of evolved into kind of the game of the century, right? And then there were a couple controversial calls there, and then when we walk away with that victory, again, middle of the season, we still had, 5 more games left. So it wasn't like, hey, we're done. Let's go hang our hat on this game. Yeah, it was a big game. But then as we went on to win those games, I think about, I mean, obviously USC was a huge game. They were ranked number 2. We were ranked number 1. Huge, huge game. But if you talk to anybody on that team from '88, I kind of guarantee you they're going to say Miami was that huge game. And then you think about, poor West Virginia. We played them in the national championship game, and after yeah, we won the national championship. But people, what was the toughest game? It was against Miami. So it's almost like, I don't think at the time, and again, I'm not speaking for everybody, I don't think at the time we knew how important that game was. And like you mentioned before, we win that game and win the national championship. They don't win it that year. They won it in '87. And then obviously we were ranked really high in '89. And I don't know if you want to start talking about that year, but it was kind of interesting. That game was something else.
I want to get to '89 in a minute. I do want to
Sure.
talk about the actual game of 1988. So obviously,
Sure.
as fans, we talk a lot about the Catholics versus convicts, 1 versus 4. We talk about just all the big picture stuff from that game. But I want to talk about actually as a player in that game. Just a couple things about that game. It obviously is, people say, well, what, younger people, like one of my co-hosts, Trevor Trowbridge, is 28 years old. He wasn't alive when that game was played. People say, well, what was Miami like back then? And I was like, Bama, like for the peak Saban Bama, maybe better, because like they were just so dominant. What was it like playing against that Miami team? I mean, we can look at the highlights, but what was it like going against that football team? I think it was, because I don't think you guys were like, hey, 36-game win streak, we got to end it. It was just, This is a great team. Well, what was that Miami team like? What was it like playing that team?
Well, I think what helped is that Holtz didn't mention there's a 38-game winning streak, right? I mean, he didn't mention the fact that they won the national. I mean, we obviously knew, but I mean, he was probably downplaying it as much as he could because he didn't want us to be intimidated, right? Because they had beat us the last couple of years. They beat us his first year. And so trying to equate this great team and kind of being on in equal footing, so to speak, right? To say that we even belong with these guys. And pardon me, the exciting thing was that they had great players. And when you look at that roster, even look at our roster, I mean, the amount of professional, or the amount of people that went on to play in the NFL during that game is just freaking amazing, right? So the idea that you had these 2 great teams with these 2 great with great players playing on them, it was great. But our advantage was we were practicing against like great players in practice. And so it wasn't a huge deal for us to kind of see a good quarterback in Steve Walsh, right? Because we had some guys like Kent Graham. He wasn't a starter, so he was helping us out on the practice squad, and we were able to see great talent in practice. So we come during the game, we weren't shocked. Yeah, they were fast. We also had something called a rocket. I mean, we had to practice against rocket too. So anyone, their fast backs, receivers, quarterbacks, anybody that they would have during the game, we had somebody in practice that played really well as those individuals. And so we weren't surprised. I mean, obviously, of course, they're going to score some points as we were, but it was one of those things where we were fully prepared. Now, if he started off with, "Hey guys, understand that they won the national championship last year, and oh, by the way, there's a 38 game winning streak. I don't think we have a chance. Maybe we don't walk away with a victory, right? But the fact that Holtz kind of, tore us down on Monday, and then just kind of a process, like literally, and of course, we didn't think about it as players, but you go through each day, and he did the same thing. He did the same thing for Navy, right? Tore us, oh, the midshipmen are great, but by the time we're able to play on Saturday, we're actually ready to go. And the majority of games, not against Miami, but the majority of games that we played in, it was actually easier in practice that week than game day, right? Because we had such great players that we were practicing against.
So I'm going to say something that I've said for a while, and I want you to either tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm right or whatever. But I think one of the things that I loved about that rivalry back then is one of the underappreciated parts of Miami from outsiders was they think of this the athletes. And I've always said, go look at the linemen that played on both sides of the ball back then. That's what made Miami great. There were other teams that had athletes, but they had athletes, and they were, Russell Maryland's and guys like that. The thing that people outside the programs underrated about you guys back then is you could match them athletically. When you talk about the Rockets, the Ricky Waters, you had guys like Dorsey Levens couldn't see the field for you guys back then. Todd Light, Reggie Brooks gets moved to cornerback early in his career because they're so loaded a running back. Pat Terrell, Stance Magala, guys like that. And I think that's what made those from that 88 to 90 especially so good, is because there were battles in the trenches that were between future NFL players, and there was battles on the perimeter of two of the most athletic teams in all of college football. And I think that's what made those games, just in my opinion, so incredibly epic and also difficult for both teams, because they could match you in the trenches to a degree, and you guys could match them on the perimeter from a perception standpoint.
Well, Brian, I have to agree 100%, because in the past it wasn't like that, right? They were so much of a dominant force that, and I'm not saying by any means that we would roll over, but when they have better talent, it's hard to combat that when you're given 110% and it's still not working, right? And so finally we were able to kind of match body on body, right? We had a shutdown corner in Todd Light that really didn't let anything go by him. He was unanimous All-American. So you look at those positions, you look at we had a great option quarterback. We had, as you mentioned, Pat Terrell. You had Stan. These are guys that folks may not have heard about in the previous games, but all of a sudden it was 88, and it was so funny because I kind of correlate our team in 88 with Notre Dame's team last year, right? Like no one really thought that we were going to go as far as we did in 88. And I don't think a lot of people thought last year's Notre Dame team was going to go very far. I know I didn't. I didn't think a transfer from Duke was going to get us to the promised land, and he wound up getting us there, right? Which is freaking amazing. So the following year, and I kind of go along with this, like this year, I think Notre Dame's going to be great. As a lot of people thought, we were going to be great in 89, not 88. And so for us, it was a big surprise. But again, it was that Miami game, again, not at the time, but it was afterward that we knew that we had participated in something special.
You guys did not lose all of 1988, went 12-0, won a national championship, beat four teams that finished the year ranked in the top five. Michigan, obviously, finished in the top five. Yes, Miami finished number 2 that year. West Virginia finished in the top 5 in US. No, I'm sorry. Top 10. USC, I think, fell to 7th after the Rose Bowl that they lost to Michigan. So one of them was going to fall, but it was two teams that you had to play went against each other in the Rose Bowl.
I'll take top 10. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And then you guys obviously come out in 1988 and are just dominant. Just blow out a Virginia team that I don't think people remember how good that team was. That ended up being a top 20 team. Sean Moore, Terry Kirby, Herman Moore, that great team. You go out and beat Michigan that year on the road, number 2 ranked Michigan on the road, beat Michigan State, blow out Purdue, beat Stanford on the road, blow out a ranked Air Force team, beat USC at home. Despite turning the ball over like 5 times, you were still able to beat a top 10 USC team. Beat number 7 Pittsburgh 45-7, beat Navy 41-0. I mean, we'll talk about the SMU game. Go on the road, beat number 17 Penn State 34-23, and it sets up the rematch. Notre Dame against Miami. It's number 1 Notre Dame against number 7 Miami. Let's talk about that game. It was 10-10 early on. Let's talk about that 1989 game, Chris.
I mean, you want to talk about just and obviously, and this is why I give Nick Saban and Alabama so much credit. It is so hard to win after you won a national championship. I don't know how Nick did it. I mean, I don't know how he's able to kind of keep them on that level, because you basically have 105 different personalities. And so trying to wrangle all those guys together and keep them focused week in and week out when, they have a ring on, so all of a sudden this is what everybody wanted, you actually have that, sometimes you can become complacent.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you keep that desire? How do you keep that effort? How do you keep that tenacity all year long? And not even saying like in workouts, in running sprints, lifting, the classroom. I mean, all these things come into play that leads up to a team possibly repeating a national championship, and that's huge. And for us, after we won our first one, we thought we were going to win 1,000 in a row, right? It was like, oh, this is going to be this easy. Holtz, you're a great coach. Let's do it. And so what we didn't realize was, being ranked throughout the whole year at number 1, we got everybody's A game plus, right? So you mentioned the Navy, you mentioned the Michigan team. I mean, all these teams are giving us 110% because, they can have a chance to knock down the number 1 ranked team. So that mindset alone was very special, because we had to do something that we had never done before. It's easy playing the underdog and wanting to take down the powerhouse. That's the fun part. The hard part is when you're the big man on campus and everybody's gunning for you. That's really the hard part. How do you stay consistent? And so I remember, guys weren't going out and partying in '89. They just weren't. They were like, man, we got something special. We got something special here. And going into that game, it was going to be huge. It was toward the end of the year. We knew there's a possibility of maybe getting 2 rings. This is the game. And obviously that they had a bunch to prove, because they thought that they dominated us in '88. So going into that game, it was like not even big on big. It was just athlete against athlete. 2 great teams playing. And I'll never forget, they were talking trash. We were talking trash. And there were a couple times in '89 where we actually got in a couple skirmishes. And people didn't like that image of Notre Dame. I don't say they wanted choir boys, but there was a difference between kind of being a maniac and then being a choir boy, right? They may have wanted something in between. But for us, like that was kind of our image. We didn't take any flack from anybody, and if somebody pushed us, we were going to punch them. So gone was this time of being Mr. Nice Guy. I wanted to rip somebody's head off, and so I can't tell you how many times I've gotten thrown out of games, and in practice, right? Fighting my own players. So we were going into this game knowing that, this is our chance to really be part of history. And of course, they came over taunting us. We were fighting back, talking crap back, pushing each other, pointing fingers. And Lou got in between us and sent us in the locker room. And he told us that if we got into another fight, that he would resign. Now, you got to think about all that kind of hype that I talked about going into this game. And I mean, I'm getting fired up talking about it. And now all of a sudden, you have to go from 100 to like 3. And then, oh, you can't be this aggressive, ornery team that has this attitude that you want to go out and dominate everybody each game. You can't do that. We want you to go out and play the best you can.
Do you feel like that kept you guys from being
absolutely.
like, did it like?
So, well, here's the thing. So at the time, we're like, well, what? We're looking around going, well, okay, no, but hey, we're going to go out there and compete. Yeah, great time, no problem. Our edge wasn't there. I mean, our edge was if we, if somebody pushes us, we can't push back because we get another fight, he's going to resign. Now, at the time, you're talking about 5 minutes before a game. I mean, okay, so he said that, but I don't. Is he being honest? We don't know. Well, we had a reputation. We knew that he was getting flack from the administration. So you fast forward about 30 plus years. I had a podcast myself a couple years ago, and Lou Holtz was a guest on there. And as we were wrapping up the show, he said, "Chris, I want to talk to you about one more thing. One more thing." I'm like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "I want to apologize because this is the biggest error I made as a head football coach." And I'm thinking about my mind, is he gonna mention 89? Is he gonna mention 89? Sure enough, he's like, "Chris, I went in there, I was under a lot of pressure from the university, we had to be fighting," and he's like, "I thought that was the thing that I should have done. In hindsight, I should have let you guys play. It doesn't matter. I'm not even thinking about a national championship, but I did something that was not in my character, but I let the administration kind of control that situation." And I mean, my mouth, I was shocked. I was like, "Oh my God." So of course, after the show, like I called all my buddies, like, "You gotta watch my show, you gotta watch my show. Let's apologize, let's apologize." Now, granted, it's 30 some odd years too late, but I mean, that's the one thing that if he had anything, and he's coached for 1,000 years, right? So if he had one thing to take back, that would be what he would have taken back had he not been under the pressure from the administration, because we were no longer the choir boys that everyone liked at Notre Dame. We were literally the fighting Irish with an attitude.
I've thought about this. I want to talk about the 90 game as well, because that's obviously another memorable game in the last for a long time. Looking at sort of the 89 matchup, the 89 season, you guys go out and beat Colorado, who was number 1 at the time, and beat them convincingly. That second half was one of the most physically dominant performances I've seen from a Notre Dame football team in my life. And that and the 92 A&M Cotton Bowl, Reggie's last team with Jerome. Yeah. The second half of that game was one of those games you look back and you're like, I just saw a group of young men just physically like it's almost like it's like the Warriors, you know what I mean? Back in the day, remember that show, like Warrior?
Oh, yeah.
Like it was like a football version of that in the second half, just physical dominance of that game. I've thought about this. Have you ever thought, look back? I mean, I don't know how much like looking back, what ifs you do, but I've often thought this, Chris. What if a 4-team playoff existed back in 1989? Because either the semis or the championship, we're going to get Notre Dame Miami again. Have you ever thought about what that might have looked like? Because I've often said I wonder what the 88 rematch would have looked like, but I definitely would have loved to seen the 89 rematch in the playoff.
It's really interesting. I've never thought about that until you mention it, and I think a lot of it has to do with kind of how we prepared for our team for the season. I mean, everybody we play, they're in a conference. And so they lose to us, they can go back and win their conference. When I was there, we used to joke about how we should get the Big Ten championship rings because we never lost a Big Ten team. So for us, it was kind of like, well, this is all we have. There's no conference, there's no division, there's nothing for us. And so the way we prepared, the way we had to prepare was that if we lost, we're out of it. And so I think that may have helped with the motivation as well. So I really never thought about, if you put us in today's system, how would we have fared out? I just always thought, and again, this is me being old school. I mean, I'm 56 now, right? So like, I don't like names on the back of the jerseys. You know, I don't like music at practice. There's a whole list of things that I don't like because I'm one of those old crotchety guys. And so, you know, I want to play the best team possible the first game of the year. And that's why I'm so excited about this game, because Miami's a great competitor. Some folks have them ranked 10, some folks don't. Obviously, Notre Dame is ranked high. So, you know, this beckons back to my era where you played. I mean, even with Texas A&M last year, like, you're going out there and playing good teams the first game of the year. And I think that's so great because you get kids that are focused after that last game. All those juniors are like, damn, man, I'm a senior now. The last game or the first game my senior year is going to be against Miami. So now all of a sudden you have dedication that you may not have had in the last couple of years, right? Because you weren't a senior and you're going to be playing a top team, a good team. Now you're like, you're working out harder on your own. When you come back or when you participate in spring ball, it's a little bit more important because you know that you're going to be playing it. So for us, all 4 years I was there, we played Michigan each year. Like, we knew going into that, like, we have to prove ourselves game one. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but you had this mindset of playing the best you can in the beginning of the year, because that's going to give you a chance to see how hard you worked, to see how disciplined of a team you were. And that's why, like, I could say that, hey, that Miami game, that was just another game going up into it. Until, you know, after the game was different, but leading up to it, we had just played Michigan. I mean, so for us, not being in a conference really helped us because there was nothing for me. So, Brian, you know, it's funny. I never thought about how our team would have fared in the 14 game playoff.
I asked because I know a couple guys that played on the 93 team, and they've brought up, I would have loved a rematch against Florida State in the playoff, right? So I wonder about that. What's interesting, you mentioned playing all those conference champions, and I know that you know this, but this is another stat that I love to give Notre Dame fans to get them to understand. Like, they've said, how good was Miami Notre Dame back then? I said it was Alabama Clemson from 15 to 20. That's basically what it was like.
Right.
And in 1989, you guys beat the ACC champs, the Big 8 champs, the Big 10 champs, and the Pac-10 champs that season. In 1989. in your last 3 years, Notre Dame beat 9 teams that finished ranked in the top 10. You beat number 1 Colorado. You beat number 2 Miami, number 4 Colorado, number 4 Michigan, number 5 West Virginia, number 7 Michigan, number 7 Michigan, number 8 Tennessee, number 8 USC. You also beat number 15 Penn State. This is just 1989 alone. You beat 4 Colorado, 7 Michigan, 8 USC, 15 Penn State, 16 Michigan State, 17 Pitt, and 18 Virginia. And your losses in those 3 years, you lost to number 1 Miami, number 1 Colorado, number 11 Penn State, and then Stanford, which I still don't know how that game happened.
Right.
In 1990. Let's talk about the 1990 Miami game, Chris. Your last installment of that game. Was it just like any other game or another game, or was there a little something extra going into that game? You guys ended up winning 29-20, but going into that game, was it different than it was the 2 years before?
Right? Okay. Now there was, because now we became those players that had a chance to play, had a chance to taste the success. And oh, by the way, this was the team that you had to win against in order to have more success, right? They've now become the good team as we are now a good team. And so, as you mentioned, it was the Clemson, Alabama from more recent times. And so for us, it was now, hey, now we're playing kind of our peers. And oh, those peers are good. And so now we had to prove ourselves because we wanted to go ahead and win in 90 as well. So, now it was getting them back in our house, and our fans were excited. We obviously wanted revenge, but again, it was now who would have known that that would have been the last game, right? For a while. And I think that what I heard was when our fans traveled to Miami, they had such a bad experience. Supposedly priests were being spit on. I mean, it was just kind of a bad environment. Now, could something like that have been managed? Possibly, but when you look at the rivalry that started, that should have been a relationship that should have gone on for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And I think that especially now with kind of two super conferences, when you look at what Notre Dame's trying to do kind of behind the scenes and make sure that they're staying relevant. I mean, Pete Bavacqua is doing a great job in that case, but having a chance to add another good team would be extra special. And so I'm sad that it ended in 90. I was fortunate enough when I was at Notre Dame, I was working on the game that Miami and Notre Dame played at Soldier Field.
2012, yeah.
Right. So I was fortunate enough to be involved in that. So I kind of hoped that was going to be one of those that was going to have a chance to stay on for a couple years. But even that one fizzled out. And so I think hopefully kind of Pete looks at this as saying maybe this is a new opportunity for us to kind of get a great relationship, because as much as I love being on that 88 team in 2025, if that's all that we can talk about, what have we done since then, right? And so don't get me wrong. I mean, I want Notre Dame to win national championship year in and year out, but let's start building a program where it was like Notre Dame was in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And I think Marcus is doing a phenomenal job with that. I mean, I haven't seen so many 4 or 5-star guys around that campus since when we were playing. And so it's great to kind of see Notre Dame coming back. I know we mentioned a little bit, but even the success of last year, I don't think they were going to go that far. But had Northern Illinois not happened, they wouldn't have had the success they had. And so just like we had adversity in 89 with that Miami loss, we were able to kind of turn that into a positive and hopefully have a great 90 year. But then you mentioned Stanford, and where it all kind of the bottom fell out.
I think it was Pete Bavacqua this summer it leaked that Pete Bavacqua had talked to the ACC about saying, hey, we want to kind of redo the ACC schedule now that Stanford's in, Cal's in, SMU's in, it's changed. And we want more Miami, we want more Florida State. And I think that's good for the program. There are definitely advantages to being in the ACC in regard to playing in Virginia and North Carolina, and that was part of the reason they made the jump. You see, I mean, they've got a big-time defensive end now. You talk about 5 stars. Well, they got 2 5-star defensive ends from North Carolina in the current class. but there's got to balance that, to your point, with but that doesn't necessarily help your on-field product when you're building a resume or being prepared to go win a championship, playing the North Carolinas, the NC States as often as you do, without having more Florida State and Miami. Unfortunately, a couple times they've played Florida State here recently, Florida State hasn't been very good. And that's not really something that Notre Dame can control. But I do think that would be something, because you got the Miami game in 88-90. You don't have a lot of games against Florida State, but you have some epic ones. You know, I mean, the 93 team 5 years after you guys played in the game of the century played in another game of the century against Florida State. And I do think it's good, because even today, it's still very much a contrast in perception. You know, and I love what you said in the Catholics versus Convicts documentary, or 30 for 30. You said, like, we weren't a bunch of choir boys. Like, I mean, there's this perception that you guys were just all in your suits and buttoned up, and you're like, hello, sir, how are you? You know, like, you know, you're Dan Aykroyd's character in Trading Places, and they're all Eddie Murphy. You know, there's that wasn't us either. You know what I mean? But there's this perception. And I think for Notre Dame to continue to do what they're doing from a recruiting standpoint, you still have to be able to play and beat those teams with that perception, like a Georgia, which I think is something that gave them a ton of credibility. Beating a Florida State, if they're good, beating Miami when they're good, is something that's important. And this year's team has a chance to do something, Chris, that no Notre Dame team has done since 1977, and that's beat Miami at Miami. Now, you only got a chance to do that once, and we talked about that because you didn't play in 87, but I've used this expression that Marcus Freeman's got some dragons that need to get slayed, right? As far as like what's kept Notre Dame from, you know, getting to this point on the field, off the field. And, you know, you can't beat the big boys from the SEC. Brian Kelly never beat Georgia, never beat Bama. Well, there you go. Haven't won a New Year's Six game since 1994. Well, won 2 of them in a week last year. You know what I mean? But there's still some there. Got to still beat Bama. Got to beat Ohio State. And this is another one against a rival that you have not beaten. You've played there since then. It's not like Ohio State where you haven't beat them since 1935. Well, we played like 4 times since 1935. So, of course, they haven't beat them. But this is a game that there have been multiple games. Like, what would it mean for Notre Dame to go down into Miami and come out with a win from your standpoint, just looking at it as an alum who was a part of this, who knows what it's like going down there and playing in this game? What would it mean for this team to go down there and come out with a win and do something that is just another dragon that's been slayed, that's that you haven't done in a long time? Here's another one. Lay that to the wayside.
Well, I think, and thank you for pointing out that Notre Dame hasn't won against Miami since 1977. That's crazy. I think I was like 8 or 4.
I was a year before I was born. So yeah.
But I think that's for folks to talk about after the season. Mm-hmm. There's so many different things going on, especially in this college football environment now, that, I mean, yes, will it be a something that you talk about after the game? Probably not after the game, but they'll talk about after the season. But right now, like, they're focused on making sure they have great practices leading up to this week. You know, I'm a Holtz disciple. Sorry. So the fact that there's all these other opponents down the line doesn't matter if you don't do well against Miami. And so, as I've seen, you know, there's this attitude, this chip on their shoulder that I've seen at practice, that I've heard the coaches talk about, that they have to prove themselves. I mean, I think last year surprised a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It sure hell surprised me. I didn't think they were ready yet.
Chris, some people in the staff, they thought I've talked to people in Notre Dame and said, look, I think we're going to be really good this year. Meaning, like, we're going to be better than people think, and we're going to be a playoff team. But next year, you know, like, wait till like they arrived a year early, and that can create a problem, because what if your team, and this is what I've said all off, the biggest question I have, and this isn't a question that I'm concerned about it, but it's we don't know, is, will this team be as hungry? Will this team stay as locked in and focused? And you talked about this from your experience. Obviously, it's a little different because you guys won the championship. This team did not. But what is it like? What is the challenge like? Does it help having you hinted about this earlier, like knowing that in 89, hey guys, we got to play Virginia. We got to play Sean Moore, Herman Moore, Terry Kirby in the opener. Like, we can't be feeling good about ourselves because we got that battle. Playing Michigan in 1990, does having an opponent like this kind of help keep you focused if you have good leadership?
Absolutely. And they have good leadership. You were talking about Marcus has a couple things he has to prove. We also got to understand that this is year 4. Well, I'm sorry, he hasn't even had year 4 yet, right? He hasn't had his first game in year 4 yet. And we're talking about things that he has accomplished. You look at how many years Holtz had been a head coach before he walked in here. I mean, obviously not Faust, but I mean, you can go down the line and market. I mean, we have to understand how successful Marcus has been. In year 3, he took Notre Dame to the national championship game. I mean, people say, "Oh yeah, well Holtz did that too." Well, Holtz had like 40 years of coaching experience. Marcus had 3. And oh, by the way, like, people still counted, like, after Brian Kelly left, they were still counting like the bowl game that he had to play that year. And they're like, "Oh, he didn't win that one." It's like, dude, he was a head coach for like literally like 6 minutes. Like, he's up. I mean, it takes a lot to be a head, and he's never been a head coach before. So one of the things that going out and getting that experience was huge. I mean, going and talking to Lou Holtz about how he won. I mean, that no one had ever done that before. So let's give a shit ton of credit to Marcus and what he's accomplished. Now, yes, are there some things he wants to? Absolutely. Does he want to lose games? Absolutely, he does not. But I think we could see how fast he matured within a week when he got beat by Northern. Now, I forgot the head coach's name. He talked about how, hey, I'll talk to you about giving you the game plan. I'll talk to you about how we did it. I don't think there are a lot of coaches who would have taken that call.
Yeah.
I know Lou wouldn't have. I mean, he would have been pissed at you. I mean, he would have blackballed you, probably never would have had a job. But the idea that Marcus took the call and they talked, I mean, what does that tell you about him? So I think Marcus has accomplished a lot. I think the staff is they've come light years from where they've been, and I think they grew up a lot last year. But what you mentioned was they had a taste of it. They didn't win it. So they should be hungrier than they were in the beginning of last season because they didn't taste it. They just heard about it. They watched it on TV. Well, this year they went through all the pomp and circumstance. They went through the gauntlet of the college football playoff, and they came up 11 points short. Well, if you need some more motivation than that, I don't know if you belong in a, not even Notre Dame uniform, but I don't know if you belong in a college football uniform, that if you can't think like, hey man, I'm gonna get back there, and this is the time we're gonna do it. And oh, by the way, all these pieces are falling in place, and we're starting to get these great recruits, and we're starting to mature as a team and as a staff. If you need to, like, oh well, I was there, you know what? Hey man, I got a lot of swag, and I was on TV, and yeah, we lost by 11, but I'm good. Then you need to transfer to another school, because I don't think you should be playing for Notre Dame.
I know you're still connected to the program. I've seen you around and things like that, but I'm sure you've heard some of the things that I have about the attitude of this team this season in fall camp. It's a question for me in that I need to see it.
Sure.
But if what I've heard, if what we see looks anything like what I've heard about some of the chippiness of this football team, this new SAS motto, which I won't repeat on the show because I don't curse on the show, but I'm like, kind of like that, you know what I mean? Like, but it's talk is one thing, Chris, but it's okay. But what are you doing on the field? And that's one of the things I love. And I've especially heard the defense is playing. I think there was an embarrassment to a degree from some of the players in the defense of how the season finished. I think that left
Absolutely.
a really nasty taste in their mouth. And you can because you guys had a pretty great defense, and I know it was like there's a couple games. What was it like bouncing back from a game like that, especially with a whole offseason to have to let that sink in?
It is hard. It is hard. I think as a whole, when you had so many great players leave with injuries throughout the year, toward the end of the year, yeah, it's next man up, but it gets frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this idea of having a chip on your shoulder. Well, people say, well, hey, you only lost 2 games. How can you have a chip on your shoulder? Well, gee, that one game was an embarrassment of epic proportion. And the other embarrassment was we thought we can compete against one of the better teams in the country, and we fell short. So losing 2 games means the world to me. And now that I had a taste of what it meant to be a champion, how I need to get there, then I need to work harder than I did. And even if I worked hard last year, I need to work harder than that because we came up short twice.
You don't
So
come to Notre Dame. You know this more than anybody here. You don't come to Notre Dame to play almost football. You almost won a championship. Almost did this. You come to Notre Dame because you want to win a championship.
Right.
That's the standard.
I mean that's which is, and it's great that Marcus and Coach Freeman and his staff, they talk about how hard it is, and you should expect greatness and be challenged. I mean, these are things that are going to take you throughout life. And I hate to be that old guy, but to bring up Coach Holtz, but these are the lessons that we were taught from Coach Holtz. And now you see kind of a modern day Coach Holtz in Marcus saying that, question everything, work hard, expect greatness. I mean, these are things that a lot of coaches haven't been talking about at Notre Dame for a long time. And by the way, let's also understand Marcus was a 4-star guy coming out of high school, wore number 1, was all Big Ten, like and competed for national
NFL draft pick, right.
So if anything, this dude that's in front of that's in front of us that has this head coach title, he knows how to get there. I mean, how many linebackers do you know that wore number 1, right? I mean, he was the stud.
That's what makes him different, Chris, in my opinion. Because I've said to people, look, you meet Coach Freeman in person, and you're like, what a nice, polite, just good guy, intellectual, smart. And I'm like, and that's a genuine version of who he is. Like, that's not fake. That's not me putting on that. That's who Marcus Freeman is, meeting him at the grocery store. So, but don't get it twisted now. He still is a former all Big Ten middle linebacker. When you get him out in that football field, that's a different guy than you see in the press conference afterwards. And they're both who he is. They're both genuine. And I think the team feeds off that. Go ahead.
Here's the thing is that his players know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's so special is that the guy in front of us has been through it all. So we want to know what it's like to compete for national. We want to know what it's like to get to the NFL. We want to know what it's like to be a stud. Like, he checks all these boxes. And very few people can do that who are head coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, what is he like 30? Was he like 29 or 28 now?
now?
I mean,
yeah.
He's like, he's still a baby, right? I mean, obviously, kidding. I don't want him to beat me up like he did with Penn State. But the idea is that he's a young dude that's coaching young dudes.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a young stud dude. So now, when recruits do their homework, they're impressed with what he's accomplished. And he's talking to their parents, he's talking to their high school coach, he's talking to them and wanting them to be part of something that he's creating, is in the process of creating. And I think that's what makes not only him special, but Notre Dame being a special place now. And let's not dismiss the talent that's walking through there now. I mean, you talk about like that wide receiver room. I mean, I don't know if somebody's going to transfer, or people or like all 12 guys going to play, because I mean, it's just amazing the type of talent that Coach Freeman's bringing in now that Notre Dame lacked for such a long period of time. But when you have success, people want to be part of it. And then you say, oh, well, we have all this tradition. And now it's okay. So we have a great coach. We have this great tradition. We're have a chance to compete for national championships now. Like, people want to be part of that.
Yeah. I think the final piece for me, which I think has worked for Coach Freeman, is there's been this weird thing with a lot of coaches since Coach Holtz, where they want to kind of look at what makes Notre Dame different and look at it as if it's like a stumbling block. It's something they have to overcome. And my impression of Coach Freeman, and this is what I've heard from former players for Coach Holtz, they said, no, he used that stuff as motivation to say, this is why we're going to be better than everybody else. Because nobody's got it. No star D tackle is going to have to do the things you're going to have to do, Chris, at Notre Dame. No star quarterback's going to have to do the things that Tony Rice is going to have to do. And a lot of other coaches, Brian Kelly was this way, Bob Davie was this way, where it's like, well, it's harder here. And it was like an excuse. And I think Coach Freeman has embraced it and said, no. This is why we're going to be good, because these things are going to make you stronger. They're going to make you better. And we're going to be tougher physically, mentally, and all that. And I think that certainly helped as well. And last question I wanted to have for you.
I just want to comment on one thing that you mentioned, Brian. They have a saying in that locker room and throughout that building, choose hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, that's something that people don't normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get like a little 18, 17-year-old recruit talking about, hey, they have to choose, like, those guys aren't used to choosing hard. They're used to getting everything their way. And now you have a coach that, again, a lot of people respect, and he's saying, hey, choose hard. It takes a special person to be here. Do you want to be that special person? I mean, a lot of schools that these kids are being recruited by, the head coach isn't telling them choose hard. It's choose us and your life will be easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not choose us and you're accepting this journey that's going to have challenges. And oh, by the way, when you're done with this journey, you're going to be a better person because of it, because of the challenges that you've had to overcome or that you faced during your 4 years here. And so, I mean, I could talk to you hours about 4 for 40 and everything else.
Let's have you back on again, and we can do that, because I think it'd be a great conversation to have.
I'd be honored to, but it's so interesting, because when you look at the success that Coach Freeman has had, it's a lot of it is what he had to accomplish as a player. And I'm sure he's learned so much from that time and how to relate to players. I mean, honestly, if you're playing for Charlie Weiss and he tells you to do something, or hey, you should think about this way, or if you have a question, dude, you never even played the game. So like, how do I listen to somebody, or if I have a question about it and you're ruling with an iron fist and I can't raise my hand, but you're going off of pure reputation, not from the sacrifices, the blood, sweat, and tears that you went through, right? And so it makes it different when you have a strong male figure in front of you asking you, hey, if you want to be part of this, you're going to be choosing hard, and it's going to help you later on in life. So you might as well get on the bandwagon, or at least wish you're on it.
I love it. We will definitely get you on, because I can talk about 4 for 40 and the impact of a Notre Dame degree, and I can talk about it. I don't know. I went to Salisbury University. I have no clue what a degree from Notre Dame can do firsthand experience. I'd love to have you back on and talk about that. I think it's a great segue to what we're going to end here with, because you have a lot of things going on, obviously, in your life. But one cool thing that you've got going on is this Mini Clover. And I'm going to have this video playing in the background while Chris and I talk. But I just want to give you a chance to talk to people about this, because when you sent this over to me and I start watching the video, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. We're going to put this, and I put the link into the chat. people can look at it. But just talk people through what this Mini Clover experience is like, because I think this is awesome.
So this is something that my wife and her sister thought up. So I can't even take the credit, right? I can't even be that guy's like, oh, it's my idea. This is great. But they came up with the idea of, hey, what if you had a short-term rental, an Airbnb in South Bend? And fans would love that, right? And I'm like, well, I never thought about that. So the process started of us purchasing a home, and make long story short, we started this a couple years ago, and we added all the gifts that you're looking at right now on the table. Our guests will receive those items when they stay at our place. And we kind of jokingly, I kind of opened up the door in the first segment, like literally that's how we meet our guests. Like, I'm the guy who's there. I'll open the door and say, hey, welcome to the Mini Clover, and all these things that you have a chance to see in the video. But more importantly, I spend an hour with them, and we have a bunch of photos on the wall. We have a great relationship with the Notre Dame artist Kathleen Kiefer. She has some stuff hanging in our places as well, and it gives fans an opportunity to kind of experience Notre Dame home football games. I call it as a national champion. I mean, there's Sports Illustrated covers in there. There's all these great photos. One of my favorite photos is a photo of me and Lou Holtz. I'm walking off the field and his arms are in the air like he's yelling at me, which of course he didn't, of course, right? So, but sharing stories like that, and kind of walking folks through that, and we got great sponsors in Verizon, Teeling Whiskey, Dick Sporting Goods is helping us provide the football helmets this year. So it's a chance for everyday fans not only to hang out with me for an hour and gets a whole bunch of signed swag, but really get a chance to kind of learn kind of what we went through, and how that experience was in 88, but also a very unique opportunity to kind of experience Notre Dame as a champion.
I think that's great. You can find that at theminiclover.com. So
Correct.
I'll just bring that back up real quick. This is the end of your video, theminiclover.com. You can find it if you're listening now. I did put the link in the chat, so if you guys want to click on that, and either if it's something you're interested in, or if it's something that you think someone you know is interested in, make sure that you spread the word on that, because I think that would be absolutely awesome. So
and we have a bunch of different price points. We have a home that sleeps 8. We have a condo, and then we have access to other hotel rooms. So really, folks from big groups to it's just you and your buddy, or you and your wife, you and your kid want to experience this stuff. We could help you experience that, and again provide a unique experience that a lot of folks don't have. And if you go on the website, there's a ton of testimonials there. Folks just kind of like, oh my gosh, it's a great experience. I remember there were a couple of folks that shared some experiences, and so we were all crying for a couple times, a couple moments, with family members and parents, and it's just this great experience of learning what Notre Dame means for other people as well. I know what it means to me, but like they're sharing their stories, and it becomes this kind of Notre Dame love fest for an hour, and then we've had a chance to have some great success with it.
That's awesome. I love it. And real quick, we got a super chat from my guy Raymond Harton. Raymond said it would be make my year, Brian, if you could tell Mr. Zorich. Ray Harton said thanks for the great childhood memories, and there's a lot of that.
Raymond, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. And,
yeah.
and I can leave you this one thing. When I was drafted by the Bears in 1991, I wore number 50 in high school and college because of Mike Singletary. And when I got drafted, I played 3 years with Mike Singletary, and it was by far this amazing experience. And so, Ray, thank you very much for kind of sharing that with me. I had a chance to play with my childhood hero, and it was just an amazing, amazing experience. I can get into that the next time I'm on the show, but the idea that anybody, if you're a fan of baseball, hockey, whatever sport it is, and you like somebody, you model your career after somebody, imagine having a chance to play with that person. So
I can't imagine playing with John Elway. So I don't know what that would be like. So I will say that I actually bumped into John Elway at the draft a few years ago. Walked by, he almost bumped into me. I was like, "Excuse me," he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." I was like, "Oh my God, John Elway just apologized to me."
There you go.
And I don't get that, you know, I don't get that very
100.
often. I don't get that very often. So I don't get that way very often. I'm just like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you," but that one was a little bit different for me. So that one hit pretty cool. So
that's awesome.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to have part 2 coming up. We got Brian Smith joining us, but I think that's a perfect way to kick off Miami week is to have you on. We appreciate you, and hopefully we'll be chatting after the game on Sunday and say, okay, it's another win for the good guys in this rivalry. But Chris, thank you so much for being on with us, and we'll have you back again here very soon. The Mini Clover, folks, check it out. www.theminiclover.com. Definitely want to check that out and have that awesome experience. Thanks so much for
Brian. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and let's also thank Mike Slade for getting us together.
Oh, he's getting a call from me after the show is over. There's no doubt about that.
Great.
Believe me.
Believe me.
Thanks, Chris.
You got it.
Well, folks, that's the end of part 1 of today's show, talking about Notre Dame, Miami with Chris Zorich. Want to thank him so much for being with us. We'll be back here again in a second with the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel with Brian Smith, because we have a lot more to talk about when it comes to this Notre Dame and Miami game, this matchup. But again, I want to support what Chris is doing. It's theminiclover.com. Go check that out, guys. When I saw this video, I was like, oh my gosh, you get all the stuff that was playing in that video that I was showing you guys. He has that on the website. You can see that video and a couple other things. You get all that stuff as part of the package, which is just absolutely awesome. So I wanted to thank Chris and give him a little bit of love for that, because like I said, I think that would be a tremendous experience. And he said it's for I believe all home games this season. So definitely want to check that out. It's theminiclover.com. Now on to part 2 of today's Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel. I am joined by my dude, Brian Smith, to talk about Notre Dame, Miami. Brian, you and I have been Notre Dame fans a long time. And you and I are in that age group where we got to live through the time that Chris Zorich was just talking about, that 88 to 90. It's kind of like a supernova. It wasn't a rivalry, and then it became this just supernova rivalry, and then it died. It's not back yet because they don't play every year, but it's good to be talking about this game again when it means something. It's a pair of top 10 teams this year. Notre Dame right now, I believe on FanDuel, is a 2.5-point favorite in this particular game, Brian. But, man, I got to tell you, this is another big one, and I couldn't think of many better ways for Notre Dame to kick off their 2025 season than to head down south, where you used to live down in Florida, and kick off this game against the Miami Hurricanes. So I was like, I got to get Brian on the show. That's about the only way I can follow up Chris Zorich is get my guy Brian on the show to talk about this game.
Well, I appreciate you having me. That game that rivalry is one of the reasons that I really got into recruiting, to be honest, because Holtz talked about it a little bit. Vinny Serrato, his then recruiting coordinator, who I had a chance to talk about this rivalry, and I'll get into that in a minute, talked about it. But Miami is actually who Notre Dame patterned themselves after in recruiting, because they knew they had to get faster. Zorich talked about the trenches a little bit, and you also brought up, hey, we had guys on the outside, Pat Terrell, who was from St. Pete Lakewood, Tom Carter later, St. Pete Lakewood, Kevin McDougal from Pompano Beach, Ely. Like
Derek Brown was a Florida guy as well, correct?
Yeah, he's from Merritt Island. Yeah, he's from Merritt Island. So they had all kinds of guys from Florida. I think Mike Helt was Panama City. They just had all kinds.
Oscar McBride was from Florida. Yeah, a lot of those guys.
Chiefland. Yeah, he played at Chiefland. So they had all these different guys, and they beat Miami for a lot. They beat Miami for Derek Brown, among others. So Pat Terrell, like everybody in the country offered him. Notre Dame beat Miami for him. Those are the deals that changed Notre Dame. And sometimes you need to, may not admit this publicly at the time, you have to follow the guy that you're trying to beat a little bit to understand how to beat him. And Notre Dame did it. Like that 87 class, the one that Chris was in, is one of the greatest recruiting classes all time in terms of how it turned out. in terms of balance. Now, a lot of the guys they recruited at position A didn't end up at position A. They ended up at position B or C. But it was weird how they did it.
One of my favorite, because you know what I love about former Notre Dame players that played under Lou Holtz? They all have their Lou Holtz voice. And they do not tell stories without immediately transitioning into the Lou Holtz voice. And my favorite one probably ever was the one where Pat Terrell in the Catholics versus Convicts, like, Pat Terrell, the greatest receiver I ever coached. Until we throw you the damn ball, you're moving to safety. It's just like so great. But to hear Pat Terrell tell that story was amazing. But to your point, I mean, we saw this a lot with Notre Dame back then. You get these great athletes, and it was different than it is now, where you kind of get recruited for a position. You don't see as many Xavier Watson, Cam Hart type of moves nowadays as you used to see that stuff all the time. And like you said, they just recruited athletes. Like, we'll figure it all out later. Hey, Ricky Waters is a running back, but right now we've got, Anthony Johnson and Mike Green and all these guys. So we're going to, Tony Brooks, we're going to play him at receiver. Just get as many athletes as you can. And I think that's what made Notre Dame so different. And that's what I don't think people really understand about those Lou Holtz teams, especially the ones where Vinny Serrato was putting those teams together, is yes, they had the Frank Stams and the Chris Zoriches and the Andy Hecks and the George Williamses and the Wesley Pritchett's and Michael Stonebreakers and the Tim Grunards and all those type of players, but that team could run with anybody. And at the time had the most explosive player in college football, with all due respect to Deion Sanders, who was a contemporary of Rocket Ismail. You had the most explosive player in all of college football, to the point where people didn't realize how dominant Ricky Waters was because he played with them. And that's something that you and I have talked about for years. If Notre Dame wants to get to that level again, they've got to be able to run with people on the perimeter, not just have a guy, Will Fuller, but you have to have guys across the board that you can say athletically, nobody is going to make us take a back seat to them when it comes to the athletes, on top of being good in the trenches. And that's where we've seen this thing transition with Notre Dame in recent seasons.
Yeah, they had guys like Ray Griggs and Tony Smith and several other players that were highly coveted playing receiver. But back then, they didn't throw it much. So it was a little iffy. Like, you caught 20 balls, you caught a ton, because Holtz didn't like throwing them much. Mm-hmm. Today's world, yeah, especially at receiver, that's been the thing that we've talked about on boards, irishbreakdown.com for the last couple of years, getting better there. Notre Dame has done it. It's going down south and getting some of the kids at Miami, again, going back to that theme, has won it. So Notre Dame, this is the most balanced roster and fastest roster Notre Dame's had since that 93 team this season. So it's kind of
you had something on our board, I think it was about 3 years ago. Remember that post you made? You and I talked about it. You're like, I'm going to make this post. And you went back and looked at, I think you went back to all the way to the Florida championship teams of the late 2000s. And you said there was one thing that all those teams that win championships or dominant teams have in common. They all have high-level NFL corners.
Oh, yeah.
And because at the time, it's like Notre Dame had a guy here and there, and then now you're looking at where they are, and it's another example of, can you recruit top edge rushers? And now Notre Dame is going to start the season with Boubacar Traore and Bryce Young. And they've got commitments from Ebenezer Utade and Rodney Dunham, and that's the thing that Marcus Freeman has quickly changed, is to say, hey, look, we're going to bring in high-level athletes, but we're not going to all of a sudden become a team that's finesse and soft and about speed. We're still going to want to punch you in the mouth. And I think that's the true Notre Dame that I think of. Everybody always thinks, Notre Dame's a blue collar. And I'm like, well, yeah, they had those guys. Chris Zorich wasn't blue collar as a football player. He was a second round NFL draft pick. He was an All-American. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, he was a dominant football player. He wasn't a try-hard guy. Yes, he tried hard, but he was a talented try-hard guy. And at Notre Dame for a long time, we accepted as fans, the try-hard guys were the guys that were inferior athletes that just gave you everything that they had. And what Marcus Freeman and his staff are trying to do is like, no, we want those kind of guys that are try-hard, give you everything they got, but we want them to be that way in taller, longer, faster, more dynamic football players that can play football at a very high level. And that was the point I made about Notre Dame against Miami back then, was Notre Dame was not taking a backseat to Miami in the trenches, because Miami could beat people up back then too.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame wasn't taking a backseat to Miami when it came to athletes. And that's what made those years so much different than what was before it, and then what's come since then up until now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that the speed outside when Notre Dame got to that level, especially the 88 team, 87 had some speed, but they had to move some guys around to make it better. And ever since then,
87 was a lot like what we've seen at Notre Dame since then. You had that one great player in Tim Brown, like a Will Fuller in 2015, a Michael Floyd in 2011, a Tyler Wright in 2012. But then after that, it wasn't the same.
Yeah, that's when they had all those freshmen. They had Tony Brooks and Ricky Waters as freshmen, but they weren't ready to be the guy. And they knew the next year they would kind of start.
Todd was a freshman on that team too.
Yeah, like they had a lot of good players. And then in 88, Rocket enrolled. So like back-to-back years getting Waters and Rocket, by the way, thank you, Joe Pa, for screwing those recruitments up, that you had the opportunity to win a lot of games with speed. And Holtz's teams always beat you up, but every now and then you run the toss sweep or speed option or reverse, like the Florida State game in 93, the first touchdown for the Irish. Adrian Drell, who was a quarterback in high school at Clark Central in Athens, Georgia. Georgia didn't recruit him because he played quarterback. Holtz moved him to receiver. Yeah, you just add a little speed, sprinkle it in on the chili, if you will, whatever sauce it is you like. There you go. So Notre Dame kind of started that way, and that's when I started looking at, just from my own perspective, recruiting down south. I was like, Notre Dame has got to get back to getting these Florida kids and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you and I have had this conversation off air, but it's not the same anymore. Notre Dame doesn't fit a lot of those kids down. I've lived there, but they've picked their spots. And Notre Dame has done a better job than any school in the country, other than maybe Oregon, who absolutely has to recruit out of state, of finding guys just randomly everywhere. Yeah. And that's the difference now. They're consistent with it. It's awesome.
They understand it's the dynamic athletes that you need. Sometimes they're from Florida, sometimes they're from North Carolina, sometimes they're from Texas, but you've got to find those dynamic athletes. And so when you and I grew up watching this game, Brian, that's what we saw. We saw legendary athletes. We saw legendary playmakers. Yes, there were great linemen, but I think of the big play that Rocket made in that game, Pat Terrell's pick six in that game, Tony Rice going the wrong way, but still being just so athletic he could get outside and score. You think of Rocket with the long kick return for a touchdown in 1990. You think of the late great Rodney Culver just dragging a dude into the end zone in that 1990 Miami game, and you just remember like what this game used to mean between both programs. And it's been a long road for both of them to get back to that point. Miami's not as long as Notre Dame because they did have that kind of 3-year stretch, at the end of the Butch, the Butch Davis, early Larry Coker, who benefited from what Butch Davis did, era. But outside of that, it's been a long road for both of them to get back to this point. And now we enter the 2025 season with both teams kind of looking to reestablish themselves as dominant programs. And obviously Notre Dame did that to a degree last year. But again, as I said to Chris Zorich, you don't come to Notre Dame to be an almost player. You come to Notre Dame to be a champion. And that's why you hired Mario Cristobal at Miami, is to, hey, look, he played, in an era where he was like I think he was right after the great era and right before the second era, I think is when Mario played at Notre Dame or at Miami. But he understands what the U was supposed to be about. And so to have this game be a top 10 matchup just gets me all thinking about just what was such a formative time in our experience, which was this Miami Notre Dame. With all due respect to Michigan, with all due respect to USC, who are much more long-term rivals, 88, 89, and especially 89 and 90, those games were the ones that you circled, on your calendar as that's going to be must-see TV, because that's the two most dominant programs in college football from that period, in that little 3 to 4 year window from 88 to 90, 91, and 92. You could even say Notre Dame 92 and 93 was still dominant, but that's when Miami 93 is when you started to see the first real cracks in the Miami. Or you can even argue 91 or 92 when they played Alabama in the Sugar Bowl was really it. But the first season where Miami was like, okay, it's Dennis Erickson's not Jimmy Johnson, and some other things are to kind of happen, but. Like, are they both going to be back, or is just one of them going to be back? And what does this game say about it? So that's why I'm looking forward to this matchup, Brian. Is just as a Notre Dame fan, it just brings you back to a time when these two teams that are polar opposites in every way you could imagine would do battle in what was usually an epic game, the epic game, and a huge game that would decide who was going to compete for or win a national championship.
Yeah, I think that game kind of changed college football a little bit, talking about the 88 game, because then it started happening more where northern teams playing southern teams, and it's been a discussion point ever since. Paul Feinbaum's show, it's up my conferences, but that game has a lot of impact, ironically, on the SEC and Big Ten, which neither are a part of. And I also think it has a big impact on how teams recruit today. So watching the game and see it come back around, I had it circled for a while when I saw Notre Dame was going to play down in Miami. And the little podcast that I started, Notre Dame, the Irish Recruiting Podcast, I just got my YouTube channel. The color scheme I have is actually from the 1977 Notre Dame team. It's kind of similar to that. I think they're the greatest, but they're unique. That's also the last time Notre Dame won at Miami. It's not coincidence. So there you go. You're muted.
I brought that up when Chris was on the show. I said it's not like Notre Dame hasn't played at Miami since then. They've played multiple games there. But I think it's also this, when you look at this, the big picture of this game, it is just one of the few remaining dragons that Marcus Freeman has to slay as he tries to get Notre Dame back to the absolute top of the mountaintop. It's, right now, to me, it's, can you beat Miami at Miami? Something the program hasn't done in a long time. Can you beat Bama? Can you beat Ohio State? I mean, I think that's really kind of what's left right now for Notre Dame when it comes to just things they haven't done in a long time that are going to signify another step towards the ultimate pinnacle, which is winning a championship. And I think that's, this isn't the same Miami team from 1988, 89, and 90. But we don't know that this is the same Notre Dame team yet either. Yes, last year's runner-up finish was awesome, but the 88 team isn't remembered because they almost won a championship. The 88 team is remembered because they won a championship, and that's why a lot of younger people don't realize the 89 team was more dominant than the 88 team. But they don't think about that because they didn't win at all, and that's the ultimate standard at Notre Dame. But I think this is one of those remaining dragons that are having to win. It's not that Miami's this or that. It's you have not gone down to Miami and beaten Miami in almost 50 years. And that's just one more remaining thing that Notre Dame has. Like New Year's Six game, that's off the list. Can't beat SEC powers. That's off the list. Beat two of them last year, especially Georgia. Can you beat Penn State? Check. You're getting all these things checked off. There's just those last few remaining things standing between Notre Dame and a championship.
Yeah, I think that I would add Texas to that list because they're the new power that's kind of added itself to the list. Within the next 3 years, I think it's fairly safe, maybe even this year, Notre Dame will play Texas in the playoff. I know they play Texas, is it 29 or 30 or both or something like that? They got a series with them. But whatever the case, Notre Dame is finally a team that you expect to play good in big games. You mentioned it when Zorich was on. They played Georgia and Penn State in a week in quote-unquote major bowl games. You want to call them? I know it's playoff, but they hadn't done that 30 years. They went to
1994.
Yeah,
I believe
January
was the
1st.
last time. Yeah,
it was against.
It was it was the end of the 1993 season. It was January 1st of 1994. Cotton Bowl against Texas A&M.
Yep.
It was the end of that team with Kevin McDougal and really I would argue the last great Notre Dame team.
Like that's some good ones, but that was the great one. Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Last year was the closest we've seen to that since they actually made it to the title game and didn't get absolutely dominated like the 2012 team did. But the point being is that's the goal you're trying to get back to. But that's one more checked off the list.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about this matchup, Brian, and just a little bit about this game. Obviously, Miami's preseason number 10. We're going to get into a lot of X's and O's and matchups and things. So you and I are going to talk a little bit about it, about more of a big picture standpoint. But let's talk about what this game means for Notre Dame. And we'll first start with on the field, and then you and I will talk a little bit of recruiting because I do think this game does have a recruiting impact as well. Maybe it doesn't like it would have in 88, 89, 90, but it still matters a lot for a host of reasons, which I know you'll get into. But just first of all, on the field, this is a I mean, it's a top 10 matchup. This is what you come to Notre Dame for, right? Is to play on the road and, play top 10 matchups and in hostile environments. And that's just one of the reasons that you come to Notre Dame for. But I think this is for this 25 team, a huge first test for a team that we know a lot about, but still have some questions about in certain personnel. I think this is an opportunity for Notre Dame to make a big statement to kick the season off in 2025. You win on the road against Miami Sunday night. Everybody's watching. It's just kind of like we weren't just a one-hit wonder like some past Notre Dame teams since 1993. 2012, great year. Next year, 2015, great year. Next year, disaster. 2018, great year. Next year, okay, but not special. This is your chance to say, no. This is the new normal at Notre Dame, and this is your first step to showing that.
Yeah, I think that if they win this game, we'll get into the recruiting aspect of it, but it would be hard for me to imagine them, barring major injuries or whatever, for Notre Dame not to end up with a top 5 or 6 seed, worst case scenario. And secondarily, I think the respect they would receive from peers and even people in the media who openly dislike Notre Dame would be pretty clear. So winning at Miami is tough when their crowd actually cares. I've been at several games at Hard Rock where, like, I've sent photos to people and I'm like, what is going on? Like, it's 2 minutes before. Yeah, I sent it.
You spent me one Duke a couple years ago.
Oh my God. I was like, I go to high school football games with more fans, like at the beginning of a game. Now, Miami is a late arriving crowd and it would fill in like middle of first quarter, but it was just like, this is bizarre. What are y'all doing? Because Miami fans talk a lot, but they don't put their money where their mouth is and go to support their team. It's the worst fan base in college football by a million miles in terms of loyalty. There's not any team that's even close to as bad as Miami. Having said that, there's only 2 games that they really consistently show up for, and that's Notre Dame and Florida State. And this year they got Florida. They rarely play Florida. They'll show up for that. They hate the Gators too. That's it. Clemson a little bit. There's some to that. But that's it. So Notre Dame's going to have to overcome it. And I think that's good early. CJ will probably talk about this game for the rest of his life in interviews and all that. But he'll probably be able to use it as a barometer for the rest of the practices and games this season. It'll help him grow. I just hope in the process that he's not talking about throwing 2 picks. I don't think the moment will be too big for him. He's been around Michigan football his whole life and now Notre Dame the last couple of years. But the environment will be crazy. And I think it's awesome that Notre Dame's willing to start the season on the road like this.
I think it's also going to be a test, Brian, because we're going to find out, like, we think the Notre Dame lines are going to be pretty good this year.
Sure.
But I think that requires both of them to play better than they did a year ago. I think we could have a conversation about, is Miami's lines as good as some people think? Yes. As good as other people think? No. But they're going to be a very good offensive and defensive line to some degree, or at the very least have really good players as part of them. I think Miami on both sides of the ball is not too dissimilar to Notre Dame in that they have some great individual talents, but are they going to be a great unit? Potentially, but we need to see it because they weren't great in either side of the ball last year on the lines, but there's talent. This is going to be whichever way you spin it, it's going to be a test for the Notre Dame lines to see, are they as good as we think they're going to be? Nothing is definitive in week 1, but it's a great early test to let us know, like, okay, this team is or isn't insert. It's not a surprise that Notre Dame became a great running team after watching them in the opener at A&M. You're like, okay, this young offensive line we didn't know a whole lot about. They got some issues still, but, man, I'll tell you one thing they can do is they can line up and punch in the mouth. And that's what they do all year.
I was thinking about this. I assume Gerby's going to start at right guard with all the smoke around it, whatever. Whoever starts it, they're going to have a massive right guard, 330-pound kind of guy. Notre Dame's O-line is still insanely talented. Answer me this. They lost 3 guys that had started in some capacity over the last few years, and they still have a top 5 O-line. Even with Charles Jagusa not playing in this game, just like from a talent perspective. Again, we'll have to see if they play together. Notre Dame has recruited O-line so well in terms of not just talent, but fit for the culture of the institution and what they're trying to do and building a brand of brothers. It's amazing. Miami's done a good job too. It's in a little different way, but they got Markel Bell, the big left tackle, as a JUCO kid. But Notre Dame has done that, and I think that gives them a better chance than most teams that would be breaking in a quarterback. You need to be able to get 4 yards of play. That's kind of an old adage. I think Miami, they're kind of thin at D tackle from those that I've spoken with around covering the media with Miami. I think Notre Dame's going to be able to lean on them and keep the crowd out of the game in the second half. First half, they got to figure it out because that crowd will be nuts. But the offensive line is the key for CJ being settled down in that second half, and I really don't have any reason to believe that it won't work.
On the other side of the ball is a very unique test for the defensive line. We talk a lot about the potential of the Notre Dame defensive line, the potential of Boubacar Traore, the potential of Bryce Young, the potential of Jason Onye. Not a single one of those 3 guys I just mentioned is a proven player in college, at least a guy that can prove it consistently to be the kind of impact player that a Riley Mills was for Notre Dame last year, the way that an Isaiah Foskey was, going back all the way to the Chris Zorich era. And you're going to get tested because Miami has the weirdest offensive line I've ever seen, Brian, in that their tackles and their right guard are massive. And their center and left guard look like they're stuck in 1992, the size that they are. It's like, but they're veteran players, talented players as well. If this defensive line is going to be what we think it needs to be for this team to make a run, we should see some flashes, and we should see some strong performance in this opener against Miami, because that might even be a bigger test for Notre Dame than the one the offensive line faces, is going against Francis Maunoa and Nez Cooper and Markel Bell and James Brockmeyer. I think Ryan Rodriguez is slated to start at left guard, correct?
Either him or Matthew McCoy, they'll both probably play.
Yeah. So this is going to be a big early first test for the Notre Dame defensive line as well. And at the end of the day, we can talk about speed all we want. And yes, you got to be able to run. But if Notre Dame's not good in the trenches, they're not going to compete for a championship.
Well, that's any team. And Notre Dame's kind of proven that they can line them up and hold their own against anybody now. And this, I know that the biggest question for me about Notre Dame is not CJ, it's D tackle and the depth, and it can somebody be a consistent playmaker, not just be a bunch of average to above average guys. They need somebody to be a playmaker. I think Jared Dawson's the most likely, but is he consistent? That's my biggest question for him. Can Gabriel Rubio actually stay healthy? That guy's been hurt his whole career, it seems like. Onye's coming back after his situation off the field last year. There are questions there. If they figure that spot out, again, how are they not a top 5 team at the end of the year because they're so consistent at all the other spots? You could argue, okay, tight end's a little thin, but you still got an NFL player as your starter. There's really no other weakness I see, but like I know Maui Noe personally. Great guy, by the way. He is 335 pounds of muscle. They did a strength test for the team. He's like something like 10% higher than any other player on the team through their metric. It's insanity. He's going to cause Notre Dame some problems on the edge. My biggest concern is they're going to be able to run like outside zone or whatever with him, and he's going to just pave the way because their running backs are good.
And that's what Penn State did in the first half last year.
Yes, they did.
Is they just ran stretch and just took Notre Dame's a little bit undersized offensive line and just got them working sideways, because there's this misnomer that if a line is undersized, you run at it. And like, well, depends on the line, but teams that tried to run right at Notre Dame last year didn't have a ton of success. Georgia tried that, didn't really work out. What Penn State said is, no, we're going to get those guys on skates going sideways. And then now they lose all their quickness, all their leverage, all their momentum, and then just opened up cut lane. And it also got their backers a little bit out of the mix as well, at least being able to come downhill and crash. And I think we'll see Miami try to do some of that stuff and then obviously run some misdirection because, as you mentioned, Miami does have a talented backfield. Yeah, yes, they lost Damian Martinez, but Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle are very good football players. Shamar Brown's a solid depth player as well, the kid they got from North Dakota State. But at the end of the day, that's why you've got to win in the trenches, Brian. And I think that's where the statement needs to be made for Notre Dame in week 1 is we're going to be better than you in the trenches. And if they can establish that, then the athletes take care of themselves. Because like you can have all the great athletes in the world, Brian, and you and I have seen this a lot over the years. Fans in the chat have seen this over a lot over the years, where you have a team that's got really good skill, but they're not that good because can't open up run lanes. And Jeremiah Love's not going to hurdle entire defensive lines to get over a clogged up run lane. And same thing on the outside. You can have great receivers, but if your quarterback's laying on his back and can't get the ball out, it doesn't really matter. And I think that's the big test for me for Notre Dame. Is a lot of people talk about CJ Carr and the new receivers and this and that. I'm like, that's all important. It's all but I want to see if the Notre Dame lines are going to be as good as we think they're going to be. Because as you said earlier, if the offensive line is what we think it should be, now CJ Carr doesn't have to be Riley Leonard. He doesn't have to bail your offense out as much as Riley Leonard did last year, because your offensive line's taking care of that. And his job is simply, dude, get the ball where it's supposed to go. Hand it off to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Make your read, get the ball, do what you do, and we're going to make sure that your jersey's still white at the end of the game. That's ultimately the goal. And if they can do that, then this Notre Dame team is going to be very, very hard to beat this season for anybody, especially Miami.
Yeah, I think that running the ball and protecting CJ are kind of obvious. My more specific thing, and this is what I said on my little channel, I said the number one player for Notre Dame is Jaden Greathouse, but for him to be effective, you got to run the ball. I don't think they have somebody to cover him. Their nickel is not that good. And just going by the grades last year, and I saw him, Keontae Scott, they've moved him outside at Auburn last year, but he was solid the year before, but he's not as good as Greathouse. But if you're playing extra guys over the top of Greathouse and you can stop the run just with your base, and Miami's got especially a defensive end with Ruben Bain, Hakeem Mesidor, they got some really good. Both those guys will at least have a little bit of time in the NFL, and I think Ruben will play in the NFL for quite a while. Notre Dame's got something to prove there. You got really talented tackles that are experienced, etc., but got a guy coming back at center who only played 3 games last year. Need to see how he is. I think Billy's the best offensive lineman they have right now. I don't know if that's long-term. And then again, assuming Gerby, he's going to be going up against Justin Scott and that Belay kid that you got from Louisiana Tech or whatever. He had a lot of plays last year. Notre Dame needs to give Jeremiah, Jadarian, and whichever player other than that plays a running back a little space. And then CJ Carr can find Jaden Greathouse. And then eventually I think they'll try to get some one-on-one matchups with Malachi. The 2 young corners from Miami have tremendous potential, but I'm going to take the 6'4", 220-pound boundary receiver over any true sophomore if the ball is thrown well. And that's what CJ does the best, and that's throw the football down the field. So if he does that, I'll play action a few times. Again, I like Notre Dame's chances, but it starts in the trenches.
Brian, let's talk a little bit about what's at stake for Notre Dame in this game. What kind of – we'll talk. We've talked about sort of what it means nationally from a football standpoint. I want to talk a little bit of recruiting now. Let's talk about what a game like this can mean for Notre Dame from a recruiting standpoint. It's not the same as beating Bama. It's not the same as beating Ohio State or winning a championship, but I do think that a game like this is big for Notre Dame. I do think a game like this is going to have an impact on the recruiting trail, and it's not as if okay, Notre Dame's getting no attention from top recruits, but I just think it's another one of those statement games where Notre Dame can go into the South, play a team that's recruiting at a very high level the last couple seasons, and say, hey, they're not us. And that's my takes. Let's talk a little bit about, because I know right now you're hot and heavy in 2027 recruits. Notre Dame's pretty much done in 26. What does a game like this mean for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail? Or what could it mean if Notre Dame's able to come out victorious on the recruiting trail?
Well, there are a number of guys in 27 that are going to be there that Notre Dame's either already offered or probably will. Julius Jones Jr., Tyson Robinson are just a couple of the starters. Some of the STA kids, American Heritage players, Miami Northwestern, Miami Central. Frederick Ard's a kid from Orlando. It's a defensive end they've offered. DJ Jacobs, maybe the best defensive end in the class of 27, an Atlanta kid at Blessed Trinity is going to be there. This is exactly how you impress people. Devin Robertson, a kid Notre Dame probably leads for. The defensive lineman from Mississippi supposed to be there. Now, a few of these kids may not make it, but they're supposed to be. This is from the Inside the U. My guy Gabby over there, he does a great job and covers Miami well. They got a list of players that are going to see Notre Dame up front that otherwise it's hard to get up to South Bend. A lot of these kids are local, or at least they're in the South. And even Xavier Hassan, a kid Notre Dame is very hot with, they've got a chance to see him up close and vice versa because he'll be on the sidelines. This is how you get kids to come to your school. You go into somebody else's house and kick their butt. Even if you just win by 3, you won on the road in a hostile environment. That's important, man. These kids, they know it's not easy to win there. You're going to impress them. I think this is very, very important to get, quote unquote, a fast start to 2027 recruiting.
And let's not kid ourselves, Brian. Some of those kids are going there to see Notre Dame. Not that they're not looking at Miami, but there's a reason they chose this game to come visit, because they want to see Notre Dame up close and personal. They're going to be watching during the pregame, seeing kind of the attitude that Notre Dame goes about their business with. They're going to watch the coaches on the sideline. They're going to watch how Notre Dame is physical. Can they run? How do they handle the environment? Because a lot of people will say, well, that's not a real tough place to play. Well, it depends. Yeah. It depends on 2 things: who the opponent is, because as you and I both know, Miami will have a bunch of 30, 40,000 people, quiet. And, a lot of times you look at Miami and what they say the attendance is, and you're like, no, I saw pictures from that game. There was not 40, 50,000 people at that. They might have sold 50,000 tickets because some company bought 10,000 to sell, but they didn't sell them and to resell, but they didn't resell them. This will be one of those games where Miami if the place is going to be packed, it's going to be loud at the start of the game, and you've got to shut them up early. And I've said this, Brian, I'm saying it now, you can disagree. It's not going to change my mind. I was there, and I said, if Brandon Wimbush hits Equinemius St. Brown on that post route on drive number 1, that crowd is never going to be the same. And I don't think that game is overly close, because that was not a great Miami team. They got exposed by Pitt the next week. They had a bunch of ugly wins over mediocre teams that year. The environment was loud, and Notre Dame did not handle the environment well. It caused them to make a bunch of mistakes, and that place got louder and louder and louder and louder. And the way it's built, it's meant to kick that sound back. So it doesn't have to be a big crowd. It just has to be whoever's there has got to be loud. We saw this in the Orange Bowl last year. When that crowd got going, it got really loud in that stadium. You've got to come out early in the game and take them out of the game, because that is one of the most, even like, they make USC fans look super loyal and into it. Like,
absolutely.
They will be. I've been a Miami fan my whole life as they're winning, and the minute they start getting beat, it's like, 100%. Oh, I'm out of here. Dolphins start next week. Or I'm just going to go party or whatever. It's a fan base that you can take out much easier than you can a lot of other fan bases. And Miami fans won't like to hear that. I don't care. I've got 2 decades of experience showing me that that's how their fan base is.
It's fact. Some of my buddies that either cover Miami, went to school there, etc., they've all said the same thing. They won't go to games if they have problems. Like, just to give you an example, if Notre Dame wins at Miami in week 4, I think it is, the Canes host Florida. If they lose the Florida game too, it's over. Mm-hmm. Their fan base will check out straight up, and you can clip this any way you want. Miami, the biggest crybabies in the world as a fan base with their own team. They will hype them up every year, no matter what. But as soon as they lose, they don't pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. Completely fair weather. The worst fan base in college football by a million miles. Nothing's even close. So they'll be loud for this game, though. You have to be able to start them out. Yeah.
Yeah. To start for sure.
Of the year. Why would you not do it? So I'm looking forward to going down there and seeing the scene, holiday weekend. It'll be pretty live. But my biggest question for Miami is just that when Notre Dame scores its first touchdown, or Jordan or Jaden, like, how many different guys can? Maybe it's Jaden Greathouse. I don't know which guy will score the first time. I've argued with myself on this. Maybe it's just Jeremiah Love on a dive play. But whoever scores that first touchdown, how does Miami's crowd react, and how does their team react? Everybody feeds off their home crowd. Miami fans have a lot of case of the yips, and I checked some of their boards. There's still Miami fans that are worried because they don't know for sure. And they don't say it a lot publicly. They don't believe in Mario Cristobal in big games. Private conversations, everybody I talk to doesn't believe in it. Mm-hmm. But he's an alum, and he's a great recruiter. So they don't want to scare off any recruits. Like there's a lot of reasons on the Miami side that then it may die by middle of the third quarter because there's no guarantee.
And the opposite's true. And this is what makes this a big game for Notre Dame. All of a sudden you go down to Miami and lose, and that's going to make them a lot tougher to deal with on the recruiting trail.
100%.
A lot tougher to deal with on the recruiting trail. It's like, hey, we went down there coming off of a 14-2 season, go down to Miami and get beat. Like you do that, and all of a sudden, like, okay, the momentum from the offseason gone. You got to sit with that for 2 weeks before your next game. You go down, hey, I'm looking at Miami, Notre Dame. Okay, well, you should come to Notre Dame. Why? I just watched you beat them, or them, you get beat by them. So I think that there's a lot of stake. There's a lot of positive, but then it's not like Notre Dame's going to stop recruiting well if you lose this game, but it does make it harder. And it elevates Miami more so than brings Notre Dame down. It's going to elevate Miami because you could bounce back, smack A&M in a couple weeks, go on another long winning streak, and you're fine. But what you've done is you've now allowed Miami to elevate itself with a win over you to where now they are saying, hey, we beat the national runners up. We beat the hot team. We beat Notre Dame. And for Mario Cristobal, it gets a lot of that talk off of his back that he can win those must-win games. I mean, you thought he was kind of getting there last year, beat Miami or beat Florida State, beat Louisville, which is a great win for them last year to go on the road and beat Louisville. But then at the end of the year, here you go. You can't beat Georgia Tech again, and you can't beat Syracuse. Which are the games that truly mattered? The ones where, hey, man, you did all the work to get here. Go 1-1 in those two games, and you're in the playoff. That's it. Or just go 1-1 against Georgia Tech and Syracuse, and you're a playoff team. And you lose both. And I think blew a 21-0 lead, right? Against Syracuse
was down 21-0 and won. That's pathetic. So Miami has a lot of demons to slay. And we talked about that earlier. Notre Dame, Miami's got more.
Yeah, sure.
And there's no excuse either. A dead rat could recruit to Miami. That campus is insane. It's a private school and it's in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And they have screwed that up royally for a quarter century. It's truly amazing, but it is what it is.
Yep. Well, Brian, let's talk a little bit about just kind of looking at this game. Let's kind of wrap up this segment. Like I said, if you guys want to get some mailbag questions in, get those mailbag questions in now. Brian and I are going to talk Notre Dame, talk college football, talk recruiting, whatever you guys want us to talk about. Brian, when you look at this game, I don't think this game matters a whole lot when it comes to will Notre Dame be a playoff team or not. I mean, we watched Notre Dame last year lose in week 2 at home to a MAC team and still not only made the playoff, they hosted a playoff game. But I do think a game like this can have a more negative impact with a loss than a Northern Illinois, because unlike Northern Illinois, who Notre Dame didn't start thinking about until Monday after beating Texas A&M, this is a game they've been thinking about for a long time. And so I want to kind of talk about the potential impact this game could have on the season for Notre Dame. Chris Zorich talked about it in the first segment of the show where, we had to put all of our emotion into that first game because we had Michigan in 88. You had Michigan in 1990. You had Virginia in 1989, a very good Virginia team in 1989. And, you put a lot into that. And we've seen Notre Dame lose that game early and the impact it can have on the team the next week or kind of coming out of it. I think it took Notre Dame a month to recover from that Ohio State loss. They put so much into that game. And it took them a while to recover. And I think that's something that you look at and say, I think it puts a little bit more into this matchup. And then you got to let it sit there for 2 weeks before you can play another football game. So I think for the team, it can have a big impact, even though it could have a positive impact, but it's not going to be something that keeps Notre Dame from the playoff, as we learned last year.
Yeah, I don't think they'll lose both. I really don't think they'll lose both. I imagine A&M is hoping Notre Dame wins, so Notre Dame is not ticked off and they can keep the attention of their players, but that's a side note. As for Notre Dame's schedule, I was going to ask you about this. If you take the first 2 games out of it, which game is the trickiest prior to playing USC, in your opinion?
Which game is the trickiest prior to outside
timing
of?
Is a lot of big part of college football, more than pro, in my opinion.
I still think A&M is the toughest game that they're going to have. Trickiest game between you then and now is NC State. That's the trickiest game.
Timing of that game is not very friendly.
That's my trap game for the season, Brian, because it's right between Boise and USC. You've got a dynamic quarterback that usually is a recipe for an upset. You've got legit athletes on the outside, Noah Rogers and Wesley Grimes and Justin Jolly at tight end. You've got a defensive system that is weird and can be vulnerable, but when it clicks, it can create a lot of problems. And I think that's the trickiest game. And you worry about in the first 6, you've got the big Miami game, you've got the big A&M game, you've got the road game at Arkansas, you've got Boise State as a playoff team, you've got your rival in USC. What's the reason for being up for NC State?
That's rough. I've got a couple of buddies that cover NC State. They expect the defense to be horrendous. But they said they're going to score like crazy.
Yep.
So if Notre Dame is not mentally checked into that game offensively, that could be a game late in the third quarter. You're like, this is not trending in the way it should. Could be a field goal game going into the fourth quarter or something. So yeah, Boise's a little bit tricky, but because they made the playoff last year, I think it makes it easier to get the guys up for it. I tell people this all the time. Like, you can tell a kid you're going to cut his hand off if they're not motivated for the game this coming Saturday. Kids look at the helmet they're playing or how they practice. And I know college coaches hate that, but it's just true. Yeah. That's Notre Dame, Miami, and
that's always been true. I mean, that's
more publicized now.
There's a reason why Lou Holtz, the stories we've heard from players over the years, like we hated Navy week. We hated Rice week. Miami week was easy because in that coaches, it was miserable getting ready for those games because he knew even back in 88, 89, 90 that's the week you got to worry about 18 to 21 year olds being focused for a game. It's when they know that team sucks and we're just going to roll the ball out and beat them. That's why he said, look, I don't need if I got to motivate you to get ready to play against Michigan or Miami or USC, then I need to find somebody else. I mean, that's just a fact. And that's how I look at this game, Brian, with Miami. I don't think there's any issue with motivation for this game. It's just about, can you go out and play your game and execute? I think that's really what it boils down to. And that's going to be the key. I think we're going to learn a lot about this Notre Dame team, win or lose. You can't say win, lose, or draw anymore because they don't have those in college football anymore. Thank goodness. But win or lose, we're going to learn a lot about this football team. It's not the end-all, be-all statement in either direction. If they lose, it's not the end-all, be-all. Right. If they win by 30, it's not the end-all, be-all because we don't know how good Miami is. And sometimes, Brian, it's just your day. And sometimes it's the other team's day. In 2012, was Notre Dame 41-3 better than Miami? No. If they play Miami 10 times that year, they probably win 8 or 9 of them. There's only one of them that's a blowout that bad. In 2017, if Notre Dame and Miami play 10 times, Notre Dame probably wins 6 or 7. But that particular day was Miami's day. And everything kind of went their way. That happens in football, which is why you can't overreact too much to one game. But the reality is for 2 weeks, that's the only game we're going to have to talk about for Notre Dame. And so I do think it's going to be a game where we learn a lot about this football team in a lot of ways. And it starts to answer the question, is this team, and so what I brought up to Chris was, will this team be hungry after the season they had last year? Will they have the same chip on their shoulder that they had after losing to Miami or Northern Illinois? Or will they be the team that kind of thought they were hot stuff before Northern Illinois because they beat Texas A&M? This is our first step to finding that. And I think it's also interesting that the first game of the year is going to be played in the same place where you hope your last game of the year is going to be played, which is Hard Rock Stadium.
Ironic.
Yeah.
Notre Dame just played there last year, so that's it's a small world sometimes.
3 times could end up hopefully they play there 3 times in a little over a year.
By the way, that might help Florida recruiting.
You think? A little bit. A little bit, yeah. Because their last title was won in Tempe.
Yep.
In the Fiesta Bowl, Tempe, Arizona. So last thing, Brian, for this matchup, what are some things that you are looking at that you want to learn or you're curious to see about Notre Dame and Miami in this game?
Glad you asked that. They've got to be able to be aggressive, even if CJ makes a stupid play, which he's going to make during this game. I've said it a bunch. First time starting quarterbacks, especially when they play their first game on the road at Miami or, pick a tough environment, are probably going to throw the ball across their body down the middle once or something dumb, whatever it is. Will Freeman and the coaching staff still let him be himself? Because he likes to throw the ball deep. That's been talked about on this show. I've listened to you guys, et cetera. It's not a newsflash. If they don't let CJ be CJ, he could get in his own head. So I want to learn about the staff, and I want to learn about how CJ reacts to a mistake. Maybe he misses a throw where he gets a chance to hit Malachi down and he just overthrows. But whatever it is. Secondarily, I want to see the formations that they use Jeremiah in. If I'm Notre Dame, look, nothing against Miami. They got a ton of athletes, and I know a lot of their players. They don't have Jeremiah Love. Put him out in the slot, put him in stack, put him in bunch formations, make Miami players above the shoulders make plays. In other words, try to get them in analysis by paralysis. Stuff that Notre Dame's never run with him. Do they be really creative? It's first game of the year. Be creative with your formations, even if it's we're just going to hand it to Jadarian and we got Jeremiah. Everybody's going to be looking at Love wherever he goes if it's not in the backfield. Stuff like that. And then finally, Eli Raridon offensively. How do they use him? He's a very freaky player, and he's finally, for the love of God, healthy. Like that guy has been completely snake bitten throughout his Notre Dame career. Are they going to line him up at split end some? Are they going to put him in the backfield? Again, formationally, you've got all freaking offseason, and you're paying Mike Denbrock more than $2 million a year. I need to see something other than him being in the slot and lined up in line. Those are the things offensively. And then defensively, I'm curious how much 3-man and how much 4-man they run. I think they'll run more 3 than they normally would because they're not dominant at D tackle, and they'll use a lot of linebackers and safeties at the line to try to confuse Miami's young receivers and fire zones and stuff like that. All complexity stuff you can't really talk about that well, but Miami is probably going to see Notre Dame throw them the kitchen sink, and I hope they do.
It's going to be very fascinating, Brian. This is an interesting game. There's some very interesting lines on this. The over-under for Jeremiah Love at FanDuel. First of all, the over-under for the game is 2.5. Notre Dame is Notre Dame's minus 2.5. The over-under is 49.5. I'm going to ask your opinion on that, Brian, here a little bit. Some very interesting of these alt bets that FanDuel has. They have Jeremiah Love's over-under. Rushing is 79.5 yards. For Mark Fletcher, it's 58.5. Jarian Price is 41.5, so that'll be interesting. If you look at some of the receiver props, they have Malachi Fields over under receiving in this game 39.5 yards. Jaden Greathouse 35.5 yards. That's going to be very interesting. They have two Miami receivers with more than that. You've got JJ Trader is at 42.5, and then CJ Daniels at 46.5. So I thought that was another very interesting one. So there's some very interesting lines that I was looking at from this game, Brian, that I thought were fascinating. But just big picture, 2.5 Miami plus 2.5 in this game. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that it's really all that off either way. It's first game of the year. You're guessing to a certain degree. That means neutral field. You think Notre Dame's about 5-6 points better. Mm-hmm. That's probably about right. But the newness with the quarterback, by the way, the prop on the if I don't gamble, but if I did, the first one I'm taking is Greathouse. Are you kidding me? Under 40 yards? I don't gamble at all. That's dumb. Yeah. That's a terrible line.
Trevor just put in Malachi Fields has gone over 40 yards receiving in 20 of his last 24 games. Playing in the ACC, by the way. So I thought that one was very fascinating as well.
If you can do it at Virginia, no offense, it's a little easier at Notre Dame when you're going to be single covered because Notre Dame's got an incredible backfield.
Yeah.
I'm not using rocket science here. So.
Yeah. Yes. Those were interesting, very interesting, Brian. So have you done a prediction yet for this game? You're going to do one later in the week?
I'll talk about it more, but right now my prediction is 31-20 Irish. I think they'll seal it late. I think it'll be close throughout. And I think
so maybe a little closer than the final score you're thinking.
Yeah, like they'll punch in a field goal late in the game, something to that effect. But whatever the case is, I think Miami will struggle with a lot of the things that Notre Dame's secondary does. I got in an argument briefly with somebody, I forget where it was, like, our secondary is just as good as Notre Dame's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to comment on that further. That
Yeah.
just shows you how delusional. And I'm not saying that's representative of the Miami fan base. This is one guy.
Well, I've gotten a lot of that in our chat and comments on our show. Is like, oh, our running back room is as good as. I'm like, look, Miami's got a very good running back room.
They don't have Jeremiah Love.
It's not as good as Notre Dame's. Come on, it's just not. So but we're gonna find out for sure, Brian, in a week from now. So that I'm very much looking forward to that. There's no question about that. So, Brian, that's going to do it for this section. We're going to do a mailbag next. So we'll answer some questions here for a little bit, as many questions as you guys want to get in for Brian and I to talk about. You can talk anything Notre Dame related. You can talk about anything recruiting related. You can talk about anything college football related. So we'll have some fun talking about that. So feel free to get that in. But before we do, folks, do us a favor. Hit that like button for us. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review, and make sure you are signed up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I got part 1 of several breakdowns that I'm doing at Irish Breakdown. So in order to kind of preview the 2025 season, I went back and broke down the entire regular season on offense. Brian and I were chatting about this yesterday. So I'm going to put out run game numbers, top pass concepts, just different things to look at last year's team so we can have something to compare this year's success or lack thereof, depending on how it goes. Are they running this play better, more, less? Are they running this play better, more, less? What's the pass game going to look like now that CJ Carr's a quarterback and not Riley Leonard? What's the run game going to look like now that Riley Leonard's not there? Those are all things that we're going to find out, but we have some data to compare it to when we want to see what kind of success that Notre Dame is able to have. So you'll have that coming out all week. I did a little football 101 today. A lot of people say, well, I don't know what 11 personnel means. I don't know what your field boundary. I don't know a lot of these terms. So I kind of put a little football 101 together to kind of break all that stuff down. That's out on the message board right now, boards.irishbreakdown.com. And then the statistical breakdown is going to be fascinating. Here was one that I put on the message board yesterday, Brian, which you'll find, I think, very interesting. If you look at last season's success for Notre Dame and you look at just the results that they had as a football team and offensively, a lot of people say, well, are you going to be able to be as effective, doing this without this player or doing that without that player? And wondering if Notre Dame is going to be able to kind of put up the numbers. And I'm looking for the statistic right now, but some of the data from this breakdown was interesting. So if you look at Notre Dame last year and 11 personnel, Notre Dame averaged 7.5 yards per attempt running the football out of 11 personnel and 5.7 yards per attempt out of 12 personnel. And if you look at it like, okay, what about, red zone and short yardage? They were still better running the ball out of 11 personnel last year. Notre Dame, I'll have this breakdown. This is just a little teaser. Last year, Notre Dame ran mid-zone 93 times in the regular season. They averaged 9.1 yards per carry on that run last year. Had 93 carries, 844 yards, 12 touchdowns last season running that particular play. So all that type of stuff. Then I break that play down by 11 personnel, 12 personnel. Did they run it better to the left? Did they run it better to the right? How'd they run it out of offset back? How'd they run it out of pistol? Jeremiah Love on mid-zone last year, Brian, averaged 9.9 yards per carry. Jadarian Price last year in mid-zone averaged 8.9 yards per carry. So it was a pretty good run for both of those guys. So I break all that stuff down, but you'll only get that by being a premium member at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian Smith, we are going to get into our mailbag. We have some questions here from Notre Dame fans. If you're a Miami fan or anybody else and you want to ask a question, go ahead and ask it. Just make sure that you don't act like a knucklehead. Ask a legitimate question and we'll talk about it. But we did have some questions that we want to get to. I have a super chat from Tom Connor. Tom, thank you so much for your super chat. And Tom's question is, will CJ Carr be calling line protection or Ashton Craig? Brian, I would assume it's going to be a little bit of both. I mean, I would assume that CJ Carr is going to have to set the protection to a degree because he can see things that the center can't see. But I think the center will have the ability to have some parts of that conversation as well. Like, hey, he'll make some line checks. He'll make some checks in there as well. the reason that I say that the quarterback should always be involved in it, I understand the need to say, hey, look, let your center call it, but your quarterback has to see it. And he has to understand it. And if he can't recognize why you're setting the protection here, then he's not going to know, okay, who am I throwing hot off of, or who can we not block? Because every time you pass pro, there's a scenario where they're going to bring somebody you can't block. If I got 7 blockers and they blitz 8, I got to know who we can't block. And I'm either move away from him, throw off of him, throw to my hot, do whatever. You have to understand that protection. So I think, to me, that's part of being the starting quarterback is I can get the protection set. But that doesn't mean that your center can't have some communication with him or make some checks where, he may make a signal or do something that says, hey, I'm going to help you get the line protection set. So I don't know the answer to this, Tom, but I would assume that CJ Carr is still certainly going to have a role in setting protection in this game. You have to, because if the quarterback doesn't know why or what's being set, then it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not sure did anybody ask about protection during fall camp media?
We haven't talked to Marcus Freeman since they named a quarterback. So it's kind of like, right now there's bigger fish to fry, so to speak, than that one. Okay.
Well, my guess is that it starts with Ashton because he's the veteran. What is he? He's 4th-year player, if I remember
senior,
right.
Yeah, senior. Redshirt junior eligibility-wise, but he's a senior in the program.
I would expect that it starts with him, but if CJ sees something that he doesn't like, he may call something. If they disagree, you get a timeout. That's one of my concerns, by the way, is CJ and him aren't on the same page, and you burn timeout, especially in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea, though, because every coaching staff has to give the quarterback at least some leeway with that, because if they're not comfortable, it's not going to go well.
Yep.
Come hell, come high water, you got to trust him whether you want to or not. I don't know what he's going to be able to do in terms of overruling Craig, though.
I think that's why I think you need to have the quarterback set the protection, and then the center can kind of check some things with him.
Yeah, by the way, you missed this, so I'm going to go ahead and fix it.
Yeah, no. We need to, tap. You're doing something. And, okay. Let's kind of do this.
I just hope that CJ understands what he's doing, so he moves accordingly in the pocket. That's a big if.
Correct. He's got to see it.
Right.
And so I think that's where the communication is. And then if CJ doesn't check it, then you're still with the protection, and you haven't messed things up too bad. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. William Chesney with a super chat. Thank you, William, so much. William asks Brian and Brian, a lot of people saying Carson Beck is the key for Miami. Am I nuts that I'm more worried about stopping their running backs? Wide receivers don't quite scare me with our DBs.
I agree with that. I know both Fletcher and Lyle, and both of them will play in the NFL in some capacity. And look, it's not rocket science. If it's 2nd and 5 all day, a 5th-year senior quarterback's going to have a pretty good time. Even with the I mean, they got some young receivers, very talented. Malachi Toney, Josiah Trader, we call him JoJo. Chance Robinson. They got the freshman kid. I forget his name. Big 6'3" kid. I mean, they got a couple of veterans. The one guy that transferred from BYU's returned a couple of kicks for touchdowns. He's very electric in the open field. They got guys, but they're not known yet. They don't have a guy that's a number one. That's proven. And everything that I was told going into this year is that JoJo had to be their number one. He's not ready for that, in my opinion. He's going to play in the NFL, I think, one day, but he's not a number one receiver.
Not in week 1, especially.
That's what I mean. If they played this game in week 8, even if it was at Notre Dame, you could argue it would be easier for Miami to win that game. Literally, because their wide receiver group, if they don't figure it out early, especially with Notre Dame secondary, they're just going to suffocate them with an extra guy in the box. One thing you're not going to do now, ironically, compared to normal, you're not going to outrun Notre Dame laterally. You're just not. So if your run game is not consistent, and they're going to be a power football team, no question. If they're not consistent, they're in deep you-know-what, because Notre Dame has minimum 3 DBs that are starting in this game going to play in the NFL. I'm not buying Miami's receivers doing a whole lot if that run game isn't consistent and they can use play action and just, if they want to, on 1st and 10, just throw the ball because they've been running it well. So if they get behind the chains much, good luck to Miami.
Especially in week 1, Brian. And that's the big thing. Is what are you doing in week 1? And you can look to last year's game and say, well, hey, week 1 last year, they played at Florida and Cam Ward threw for 385 yards and 3 touchdowns. Okay, great. Number one, Florida wasn't very good early in the year. And number two, if you're talking about it from you got to get your guys on the same page and all this. Number one is Cam Ward, I believe, was with Miami during the spring.
He was there, and that changed everything. He was there in the spring.
And you had a very veteran receiving core that had kind of been through it. And this one is different. This is a very different makeup of the team. That's why I think Miami, where I disagree with some people who think Miami is not going to be very good, is I could think you could argue that Miami's overrated, as they should not be a preseason top 10 team. There's no reason, there's no evidence that they're a top 10 team, but I think they could play like one in the second half of the year. That's where my disagreement is. If they can survive the first 5 games and be 4-1, at worst 3-2, but I think you got to be 4-1. Yeah, I think that team's going to be a lot more dangerous. If Miami goes into October with only one or no losses, they're going to be a very dangerous team, because you're going to see the line come together more. You're going to see this defense have a much firmer grasp of Heatherman's system. You're going to see the receivers now have some time under their belt. I think those things are all part of what will make Miami dangerous, but it's also what makes them vulnerable to some of the things that Notre Dame does well, is because they're not as experienced, not just experienced overall, but especially not as experienced playing together as what we've seen from Notre Dame. And I think that kind of stuff matters. So that's – and the other thing too is, and this is a point that was just brought up in the chat, Andrew Gilmore brought this up, but Carson Beck's going to run an offense that's much different than the one he ran at Georgia. How's he going to adjust to that? I don't know the answer to that. But to the point, I think if you can shut down the run, you want Carson Beck to beat you in game 1. You want to force him to beat you on throwing on 2nd and 9 and 3rd and 8. That's where you want to live. If they're able to come out early in that game, get Mark Fletcher hammering you in the middle, having Jordan Lyles slashing you with his quickness and speed, and they're constantly ahead of the sticks, just 2nd and short, 3rd and short, that crowd keeps getting more and more louder. They're wearing on you. It's 4th quarter. You get down there and think about what Notre Dame did to A&M last year in the 4th quarter. Notre Dame just hammering them, just physically hammering them. Gash plays 4th quarter. Notre Dame's just pushing A&M around because they were just gassed. Notre Dame can't allow it to get to that point in time. They have to be able to force Miami to a lot of, we know you're passing here situations, because that's when you're going to get mistakes from the quarterback who's throwing to his receivers for the first time in a real game. You're going to get receivers. This is the first, meaningful situation for JoJo Trader where he's the guy. I mean, he played last year, but now it's a different level of pressure for him. Doesn't have Xavier Restrepo and Isaiah Horton and all those guys to kind of take some of that pressure off. And in week 1, that can be problematic, and that's what Notre Dame's going to have to bake on. But if you let them getting into a lot of manageable situations because the run game is rolling, that makes Carson Beck more dangerous. So I agree with Brian. I agree with William. I think the key to this game for Notre Dame is going to be don't let Miami consistently run the football. Carson Beck will make his plays. The receivers will make their plays, but you're also going to make even more, and that's going to be the key. Good observation, William. Chipster asks, Coach, who would win a matchup, the 93 Irish or the 24 Irish? This is an interesting one, Brian. It looks like you have a no-brainer, or is that a I don't know?
It's impossible to compare eras because of how they practiced and everything they did is the thing. Talent on both is awesome. It's so different football, everything they did, the rules, everything. I love questions like that. You don't ever know, but here's where I'll go with it. Let's say we assume they're all on sort of a similar plane. The matchup is fascinating because you've got the power of the 93 team on both sides of the ball. Great D-line with Bryant Young, Jim Flanagan, Brian Hamilton. You had just great deal. Oliver Gibson. Burt Berry was on that team in 1993. I think he was a freshman on that team. And then you had the offensive line with Aaron Taylor and Tim Ruddy, just a tremendous offensive line. You had Lee Becton running the ball. He's one of my favorite all-time backs at Notre Dame. What that team didn't have as much of, Brian, is that team didn't have the same type of speed on offense that the earlier teams had. The secondary had some, but even then it wasn't quite as much as they had in years prior because, they'd lost Tom Carter. Bobby Taylor was still a dude. Jeff Burris was still a dude. It was sort of the end of the era of Holtz having those type of elite athletic teams.
But the other thing about that game is one thing that's not often talked about is that 93 defense had a lot of talent, but they were also at times underachieving because Rick Minner, to me, was a bit of a concern. And I think Mike Denbrock would be able to do some things in a X's and O's matchup against Rick Minner like we saw Tom Coughlin and his staff do. You know,
carved him apart. He carved him apart.
When Foley just shredded him in that game. And it wasn't the only time that happened that year, Brian. So once Florida State got rolling in the second half, there wasn't a lot Notre Dame could do schematically in that game once they were able to find how can we neutralize their defensive line, which is killing us. So Bryant Young just destroyed Florida State in the first half of that game. I mean, he's going to block them. That would be the fascinating part. The trenches of that team were definitely better than what Notre Dame had last year. But I think that the athleticism that Notre Dame had on defense and at running back could give that team some problems too, along with Mike Denbrock. And look, anytime you got a mobile quarterback like Riley Leonard, that's going to make that an intriguing matchup. But I think probably I'd lean towards the 93 team just because I think they could lean a little bit on Notre Dame in the run game like we saw Penn State and Ohio State do in the postseason last year.
That's possible. Both those teams, mobile quarterbacks. The players are bigger now is the one thing. Like I might lean 24 just because like the size of the players and everything. It's just so much different. The hash marks are different. That'd be really hard. Some of the rules would depend on what your area you played in. You playing 93 rules, you playing 2024. There's all kinds of stuff. So I don't know. A lot of NFL talent. You wouldn't have a problem looking at that. Like it's incredible.
Yeah. Florida Irish asks, what are your takes on the stadium environment in Miami based on the 2017 game and then the recent Orange Bowl experience? So I'll give mine. I was at both of those games. Very different environment than a lot of the games that Brian's been to. Number one is the first game in 2017 is Miami fans were still into the game because they were undefeated. They hadn't lost yet. It was a battle of top 10 teams. And so they hate Notre Dame. They were fired up. They were riled up. They were ready to go. They were loud to start that game. And then, of course, Notre Dame, they hold Notre Dame on that first drive. And Brandon Wimbush misses the touchdown pass. I believe Notre Dame ended up punting on that drive, which I still to this day just says so much about Brian Kelly. And it was very evident from early in that game that Notre Dame's offensive line was going to have some problems against because Miami's just like, we're just going to throw everything at you and you're going to have to throw the football to beat us. And then, of course, once this turnover started happening, it's like, okay, it got out of hand. Once it started going well for Miami, that place was one of the 5 loudest stadiums I've been in, like without question. It was pretty loud in the Orange Bowl this year too, again, because you had 2 fan bases in a very close game that are pretty loud. But it's also I don't know that I love the environment. I think it's a weird environment. I just don't love the layout of the stadium, but it's loud. And if it's a close game, it will be very loud. If Notre Dame goes up on them early, it'll get real quiet. And if it looks anything like the 2017 game did in reverse, by the third quarter, it'll look like it'll be not even half the crowd, in my opinion.
Yeah, Miami fans will leave. Like they do not accept anything other than exactly what they want. Miami, the best way I can define Miami fans for those that haven't been there, whether it's Dolphins or Canes, they are true internet fans. They are true phone fans. Like you can get instant gratification from your phone or from the internet, whatever you want. It's not how sports work. Sometimes you got to eat a knuckle sandwich. They won't stick around for the knuckle sandwich. But they're front runners. There's a lot of fraudulent Miami fans. They got some crazy ones. There's a guy I took a picture of who's been to every Miami home game and all but like 3 road games since 1978. There's a few of those guys too. That's crazy, by the way. But at the same time, it's just, you don't know how it's going to go with them if they get down. Like second half, you could see empty seats if Notre Dame's up 24-10, like legitimately. Mm-hmm. Their fan base is weird. But to start, like I'll probably I'll send some photos out to friends and this and that from the side. I expect wholeheartedly to see some crazy people and I expect to see some fans like throwing, like they've got nutty people. It'll be interesting to see if ESPN or anybody shows that.
Probably not.
It's I will.
Probably.
If you want to check my Twitter after the game, I guarantee you it'll be interesting.
Yes. Yeah. We shall see, Brian. But you've had some different experiences than I've had in Miami, because you've been there for some of the Dukes and the games like that. Well, it was a Duke game. It was a couple. I think Riley Leonard was the quarterback for Duke in the game. Weren't you at the 22 Duke game?
Yeah. When they just beat the bejesus. That's when Mario took over.
Yeah.
And like they didn't have the roster, but they also got out coached. It wasn't one or the other. It was both.
Like the game, it was empty. The crowd was like empty at the beginning of the game.
Yeah. I remember before the game, it was this typical day in South Florida. It's warm and all that, but there was nothing special, but they never showed up. I mean, seats near midfield, nobody there.
Yep.
Just pathetic. And I'm like, this is hard. It changed the photos that I took, like pregame, because I want background where you got fans.
Mm-hmm.
I started taking vertical photos where it was like long distance towards the other goalpost. Side to side, you could see like all these holes that I'm talking about 5 minutes before the game kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like their fan base is really, really weird.
Yeah.
They only show up for Florida State, and Notre Dame, occasionally Clemson, depending on circumstance. That's it.
Yep. All right, let's get to we got a super chat from Michael S. Michael asks, thank you for the super chat, Michael. He says, what's your opinion regarding Mario Cristobal's big game performance? He has another question about first game performance, and I don't know if that's a change or an alteration, but we'll go big both, because I think they're both interesting questions. But, big game performance, it's a very checkered. He's got a very checkered history when it comes to big game performances, Brian, because there are some games you could point at and say, boy, that was a heck of a win for them. It was a big win for his program, and that game mattered, and he's won some big games. It's not like he's devoid of big games in his career. I mean, you go back and look at, in 2018, I think it was his first full year, they beat number 7 Washington in overtime that year. You look at the next season in 2019, they beat number 5 Utah in the Big 12 championship, or the Pac-12 championship game. Also beat a ranked Washington team on the road that year, and then also choked away a game to Auburn at the beginning of the year. So I still don't understand how they lost that game. 2021, they come out, go on the road, beat Ohio State in Columbus. Mario Cristobal is head coach of that football team. Then later that year, they lose at Stanford, and then they get blown out by Utah. Play Utah again 2 weeks later in the Big 12 title game, or Pac-12 title game, and get blown out again. And then they lose to Oklahoma. That was his last year. Although I don't think he was the coach for the Oklahoma game in the bowl game.
I don't think so.
And then, comes to Miami in 2022, and, he's taken over a bad program. So they lost all their big games that year. And I don't think that's something I'm going to necessarily hold against them. Next year, they beat A&M at home, and that was a great win. But then they lost the rest of their games against ranked teams. And then last year, it looks like he's kind of turning the corner, Brian, because they have that big game at the beginning of the year at Florida. They didn't just beat Florida; they blew Florida out. I mean, that game was over by halftime, and I think it was only like 17-0 at halftime. But you watch and you're like, dude, this is going to get ugly. Like it was not a competitive game. And then they had a big win at Louisville. I think that was a great win for them. And then, of course, they choke away the Georgia Tech and the Syracuse games. And I think the Syracuse game is a big game. It wasn't that Syracuse was a highly ranked opponent, but that was a game where if you win, you're in the ACC championship game. If you win, you're a playoff team. I mean, you're 10-1. If you beat them, you clinch a spot in the ACC title game, which then, in fact, clinches you a playoff spot, no matter what happens against SMU in the college football playoff, or in the ACC title game, because that's who they would have played, not Clemson. They would have played SMU, and he choked it away. So it's a very checkered history, but he's I mean, you could argue he's got more top 10 wins the last few years than James Franklin does, but it's a very checkered history.
Yeah. I mean, the game against Ohio State, I remember the most because they kept running the same play with the H-back, and Ohio State never adjusted. It was generic, and Ohio State's defense coordinator crap the bed. But as far as big games in general, I think he does a pretty good job with that, but I think he struggles with the emotion of the team against mid-level talent. Let me give you an example. That Georgia Tech game where they lost at the end, I was at that game. I left right before.
About 2 years ago?
Yeah, okay. I was at that game and I was on the sidelines. I left right before that happened. I got in my car and I got about a mile from the stadium and I turned on the radio just because, and I couldn't believe what the announcers were saying. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? So I missed it. I was standing there, but I thought the game was over. And getting out of Hard Rock, not a good time, being very kind. So that's the kind of stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like, he doesn't consistently learn from his mistakes, and his teams are roller coasters. So I expect him to be very high for the Notre Dame game. But if you withstand the first 5 to 7 minutes, good luck. Expect if you're Miami. Do you really think he's going to outcoach Notre Dame? No, I don't. Now, he's a great recruiter, but right. I still think he's also not got the greatest culture. They've got 19 transfers just this year. He's got too many mercenaries. If you get them down, you've got an advantage. And I don't think he's going to pull them out of that hole.
You've got to weather the early storm at Miami. That's the key.
Yes, sir.
Just don't let them jump on you the way they did in 2017. Don't let them jump on you the way they did Florida last year, especially at home, because that game was on the road, especially at home. Just a little note, this is going to be year 4 for Mario Cristobal, just like Marcus Freeman. His first year, I don't count that. He walked into a mess. Second year, they lost 2 home games, lost at home to Georgia Tech, lost at home to number 10 Louisville. Last year, however, Miami did not lose a game at home. They beat Florida A&M, beat Ball State, beat Virginia Tech, beat Florida State, beat Duke, beat Wake Forest. So they did run the table at home last year. Both of their losses in November were on the road, at Georgia Tech and then at Syracuse. So they were a more successful, I wouldn't say necessarily a better home team, because I don't think they played really. I mean, Florida A&M, they killed. Ball State, they killed. They needed a last-second play. I don't even get into the officiating call. Let's just say they needed a last-second play to beat Virginia Tech, and then beat a bad Florida State team, and then ended up beating Duke convincingly. But that was a very close game for a long time. Duke was winning that game for a chunk of the game, and then they beat a bad Wake Forest team, they just announced today Robbie Ashford's going to be their quarterback. It's going to be a long year for Wake Forest. Brian's face says exactly what my tone about it being a long year.
Whatever the over-under is, I got the under.
I got the under. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Michael S. also says, what about Mario Cristobal's first game experience? This is the second chat, so I'll go with it here. Again, a little bit checkered, so let's just pull up Mario Cristobal by the season. I'm going to leave out the COVID year because that's just such a weird season. But here's what Miami has done in the first games of the season. In 2017 or 18, his first year there. First game of the year was against Bowling Green. They won convincingly, beat Bowling Green, Portland State, San Jose State before losing to Stanford. 2019, his team's first game of the year was against Auburn. That was Bo Nix's first career college game. And, was that Bo Nix's second year? That was Bo's second year at Auburn, I believe. And first game of that season, they lost to Auburn. Auburn won that game late. And so they lost their first game of the year in 2019. 2021, first game of the year was against Fresno State. They won 31-24. Not overly impressive. Did not make you think that a week later they're going to go into Columbus and beat Ohio State. That game did not give you the warm and fuzzies about that. That is for sure. 2022, first game of the year was against Bethune-Cookman. They won 70-13. The first real team they played was A&M in week 3. They got beat on the road. And then last year, their first game of the year, or 2023, their first game of the year was Miami, Ohio. They beat them convincingly. First real game was the next week against Texas A&M, beat them 48-33. And then last year, the first game of the year was like this one. It was a big name school. It was a rival, and they played Florida at Florida and smacked them. So that's Mario Cristobal's track record in big games and first games.
Yeah, I'm not buying that they're going to be really good across the board against Notre Dame.
Let's go to Zircon with a question. He says, what would you think of the Notre Dame team if CJ Carr throws for 3 touchdowns week 1 against Miami? I'll say for me, I would need some context.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
I mean, if it's 3 touchdowns because you were down 5 touchdowns and he threw them late and, got you some cheap scores. Like if you look at Drake May's statistics against Notre Dame in 2022, you're going to think like, wow, Drake May went off, but the rest of North Carolina's team wasn't very good, because you're going to look at it and it's going to be, he passed for 301 yards and 5 touchdowns against Notre Dame. What you're going to miss, however, is like, I think 3 of those touchdowns came in the fourth quarter. And I think he had like he was less than 150 yards passing going into the fourth quarter. Notre Dame was up, I think it was 45-17. Throws a bomb, gets a final 30 seconds. Notre Dame doesn't cover somebody, touchdown. Yeah. If it's like that, I mean, if you look at the stats, like, wow, Drake May, 300 yards, 5 touchdowns. He kept final score 45-32. Boy, that must have been a shootout. No, it was a blowout. Like, and if Aldrich Estimate doesn't fumble going into the end zone, it's even worse than that. It was about to be 52-17. And remember that it's raining. He leans the ball, tries to put the ball over the end zone, fumbles it. North Carolina recovers. So I need context. If you tell me it's a competitive game and CJ Carr, or if it's Notre Dame's never trailing big and CJ Carr throws 3 touchdowns, I'm going to say I think Notre Dame's going to win. But more importantly, that's going to bode very well for what this team's going to become moving forward if he comes out in that first game, as long as the 3 touchdowns aren't matched by 2 to 3 bad interceptions. Again, I don't say interceptions. I say bad interceptions. There's a difference.
Yeah, I just think it depends on context as well. Is he making those throws in the rhythm of the offense and how they drew up the game plan? Simple as that. Now, I'm not against if you're down 24-13 going into the fourth quarter and he hits touchdowns 2 and 3. Okay, that's the exception. There's possibility and you come back and you win at the very end because he gets his 3rd touchdown because they had to throw. That's okay, but that means you still got problems as a team. So I think that we'll find out a lot about CJ, and he'll probably take a leap between now and like the USC game. The difference between CJ Carr, I'm sure you'll do a podcast on this, will be enormous. It's part of the maturation process.
The bye week is going to be huge in that regard because he's going to have a lot more time to process that game. And that could go 2 ways, Brian. I mean, one is he struggles and he's got a couple weeks of practice to kind of mentally recover and get comfortable. Here's why you made this mistake. Here's why you made that mistake. The other one is, okay, what if he shreds Miami? Let's bring him down off the pedestal a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like this is good, but like we missed this read. We got to make this play. Cause that's what great coaches do. Like, hey, you had a great game. Cool. But it wasn't perfect. And here's what we can do to make it perfect. Right. And that'll be how that goes. And I think that extra time will be good for him either way after that game. USMA 87, will the Notre Dame crowd be larger than the Miami crowd? No.
Not even competitive.
No.
This is the one game besides Florida State that they will come out for consistent. Again, they play Florida every once in a great while. This is the game they won't sell tickets. Notre Dame will have 20% of the crowd, I would guess. That'll be about it.
Notre Dame rarely does that. I mean, if we're being honest, Notre Dame rarely does that for a host of reasons. Number one is because Notre Dame has such a spread out fan base, it can sometimes be harder to get them into a region where they don't necessarily have a larger built-in fan base. So it's going to be easier to do that at Syracuse than it would be at Miami, even if they're both invested in the game, because there's so many more Notre Dame fans in the Northeast than there is in South Beach. Not that there aren't Notre Dame fans, because there's Notre Dame fans everywhere. The other part of it too is that part of the reason Notre Dame struggles to take over a stadium is because a lot of teams are like, I'm not giving up my ticket for the Notre Dame game. like I'm not selling that. And I mean, whatever the reason why, Notre Dame fans don't, maybe because they're smart business people, they're like, I'm not paying $5,000 to go watch them play, X team or whatever. So Notre Dame doesn't do that a ton, where they just take over. Like, I've never seen Notre Dame take over a stadium the way that like Nebraska did in 2000 or the way Georgia did in 2017. I don't know that I've ever seen that outside of like Stanford. Yeah,
Stanford doesn't have any fans anyway.
Right. Beefeater ND08, what plays do you call to start a game and calm CJ down and get him in a groove? What would you call for the first series? I'd have him chuck one a mile. If it lands, game over. So, Brian, did you ever hear the story about what Lou Holtz said to Tony Rice when he first put Rocket Ismail in the game against Michigan in 1988? Did you ever hear that story?
Something to the effect, don't think that you can throw it past him, just let it go or something.
Lou Samoji told me this when he said that Lou Holtz went to Tony Rice and said, I want you to throw it to Rocket. I want you to throw it as far as you can. I don't care if it's incomplete. Just throw it as far as you can, because he wanted everyone to know when 25's on the field, you better be ready for that. Because the hope was that it's going to force teams to kind of back off of the run game, which is a big reason why he thought so highly of the Rocket. But, yeah, we're going to put the young buck in and just we're going to throw it deep. And Tony Rice might have been one of the 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country that could actually overthrow Rocket Ismail.
He had a gun.
He had a cannon. Didn't know where it was going to go, but he had a cannon. There's no doubt about it. Got some thoughts on this, Brian?
I think the biggest thing is you've got to get CJ a play. Again, formationally, as I talked about earlier, they got to get something that CJ wants run. Of course, the coaching staff's got to agree, that makes Miami pause. Because I think that, like everybody else, they're going to at least show a lot of fronts that are going to feature the idea that we're going to try to stuff the run first. And by all means, I get that. But Notre Dame's wide receiver group is way better than it's been in several years, since probably the 15 team. Not saying it's that good, but it's in that realm where they got guys that can at least go to the NFL draft. You got to use them. You got to get him open for a big play early. And from what I've heard about Heatherman, the defensive coordinator, he had 2 years at Rutgers, 1 at Minnesota. That's the only years he's been a coordinator at the P4 level. He'll run a lot of cloud or like over-the-top defense, but this is against a first-time starter. They're probably going to try to heat him up a little bit too. You got to take advantage. One of those early downs, they got to hit a play. Otherwise, you run your offense. I mean, Notre Dame's got a great offensive line. All those guys will make it to the NFL, at least to the combine or whatever. You should be able to run the ball and try to tire them out. By the fourth quarter, you should average 6 yards a carry minimum, running the ball between the tackles. They don't have somebody behind like their first couple of guys that's ready. In my opinion, at D-tackle, Notre Dame needs to run the ball. And then CJ, the one thing he does well, ironically, I'm not saying he has Tony's arm, but he's got a pretty good arm. They should be able to hit a play later in the game if they run the ball consistently and get CJ in a groove.
He actually was not the D coordinator at Rutgers. He was just the linebackers coach. So last year was his first year actually calling plays as a defensive coordinator. He did very well. Last year.
I just don't know what to expect out of him, because their secondary last year was embarrassing, but they pretty much replaced him except for O.J. Frederick, who was a true freshman. We don't know what we're going to get out of their secondary. Can they run the zone defense that he wants? Will they be able to communicate it? Last couple of years, they were awful at doing that. So it's all questions are there. That's why I would come out with a lot of different formations. Try to get a cheap touchdown where they get a bust. It's very possible.
Archer 452 says, if Notre Dame goes 12-0, what's the single biggest reason? If Notre Dame goes 9-3, what's the single biggest reason? I think it's the same for both, Brian. I think it's, if Notre Dame goes 12-0, the biggest reason is they're as good as we think they're going to be in the trenches. If Notre Dame goes 9-3, they're not as good as we think they need to be in the trenches. I really think it comes down to that. Look, skill doesn't slump as much as scheme does, and scheme slumps a lot of times because of what happens in the trenches. And I view that as the biggest concern I have about this team. I just don't know if it's a draw in the trenches. Notre Dame's going to have better athletes than everybody they play this year. If you lose in the trenches, now all of a sudden that skill advantage becomes less advantageous, as we saw in the Northern Illinois game last year. Northern Illinois did not out-athlete Notre Dame. They beat the crap out of Notre Dame in the trenches on both sides of the ball. That's really what, especially Notre Dame offense after the first drive. I mean, if you think about how bad Notre Dame's numbers were in that game, just overall, Brian, and I mean, let's just pull it up. So Notre Dame last year, I believe, was less than 300 yards of offense last year against Northern Illinois. So scored only 14 points, had a 14-13 lead in the fourth quarter. But if you look at that game, here, let's go here. And let's go team stats. Notre Dame finished that game with 286 yards of offense.
That's
so I was
embarrassing.
correct. But they had 75 yards in the first drive of the game when they went down and scored. So in the next 3.5 quarters, they only had barely over 100 yards. It was 211 yards. 211 in the next 3.5 quarters. That's a problem. And it was because their offensive line got whipped. And yeah, there were some mistakes of the skill, but like their offensive line got whipped. And yeah, Jaden Greathouse dropped this pass and Riley had this bad interception. It should have never mattered. You should have been able to go out there and just run the ball down their throat.
It should have been 28-13 going into the fourth quarter, and it didn't make a difference at all.
Exactly. And if Notre Dame doesn't get beat in the trenches, that's kind of where it goes. So
yeah, I totally agree. It's all trenches, man. CJ will be easy to coach if you're good in the trenches,
right?
Because he's in advantageous situations to throw it. He's insanely accurate. It'll take care of itself. Now, he may throw 8-10 picks this year, but he's going to throw passes they haven't had a guy since Clausen make. They can run the ball and stop the run. That's a top 5 team.
Because if you say, okay, Notre Dame's going to go out and CJ Carr is going to be the reason that they're 9-3. I say, no, it won't be. Yeah, but Brian, look at the end of the year. He had 14 interceptions. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but let's break down why. Because he never felt the offensive. They couldn't run the ball in this game. He didn't have time to throw. Like, he never got comfortable. He never got into a rhythm. And we're going to look back and say they couldn't just go out there and dominate teams in the trenches like they needed to. And that ultimately is what it's going to come down to. It's never as simple as just one reason, but that will be the biggest reason, in my opinion. Because we've seen games, Brian, where the quarterbacks did almost nothing. Not just Notre Dame, but look at the Michigan-Penn State game in 2023. Michigan attempted a grand total of, 1, 2, carry the 5. 0 passes in the second half of that game and beat Penn State at Penn State. Why? They just beat them up in the trench. It didn't matter what J.J. McCarthy did. You had a first-round draft pick, a quarterback, didn't use him. Why? Didn't need him. They knew it was coming. They couldn't do anything about it. So can't throw an interception if you don't throw the ball. And why didn't you throw the ball? Because you were just dominating that team in the trenches. Vanilla Chill, does the experience this team had at Kyle Field last year help them with the environment they will have in Miami? To a degree, yeah. It's a different layout. Miami kind of goes like this on you because of the way of the layout of the stadium, where Kyle Field is more of a much better stadium, but a more traditional stadium that kind of goes out like this and up. But it was very loud. And like, I don't know what it was like on the field, but in the press box, when that crowd got going, Brian, I mean, you're vibrating. I mean, you're shaking in the press box. Like this press box is rocking. So I certainly think so. I mean, I think playing in the Orange Bowl will be that way. Playing in the Sugar Bowl was loud. Playing in the national championship game was loud. Buckeye fans travel. That is a fan base that travels. And so I think they've had a lot. This game, to me, I don't think is going to be a lot like 2017 for a lot of different reasons. Win or lose, I don't think it's going to be because they just got swarmed by the crowd as much because of that experience. So I think A&M was part of it, but it's not the only experience they had last year, where they had to play in front of a very loud, I wouldn't say hostile crowd, but very loud crowd. Thoughts?
The biggest question is CJ, though. He didn't play in that game.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing. But like the defensive players, like a ton of them are back. O-line, I don't think it'll matter that much. Jeremiah, nothing really bothers him. My biggest question will be any of the transfers and CJ. But overall, I mean, a lot of them, I think that game helps. That's a really good question.
Well, and the thing about Notre Dame's transfers is they're getting them from Power 4 schools.
Yeah.
I mean, Malachi Fields had to play at Notre Dame last year.
Yeah, he's seen what it looks like. Play for
Jared Dawson had to play at Notre Dame last year. You know, he had to play against Miami at home, but getting Will Pauling, who played Bama last year, who I think it was at home, but he had to play LSU in a bowl game. He's played in some of those big moments. Maybe you could say not as loud, but I mean, you look at Will Pauling the last couple of years. He's played against Ohio State. He's played against Alabama. He's played against Penn State, and so I think those things are different when you've got the pressure of playing Notre Dame, but when you've played at Iowa, where they played last year, at Nebraska, where they played last year, when he was with Wisconsin, he played at, Minnesota Cup, which is, again, a loud stadium. When it's that game, it's very loud.
Yeah, those two hate each other.
Yeah, he certainly played in those environments. So I don't think the issue is more so the communication. That's more so the issue. But again, we go back to the last question. If Notre Dame comes out and establishes dominance in the line of scrimmage, then you're not needing your young quarterback to put the team on his shoulders and make a ton of plays. Gavin Wright asked, I don't know what to expect from Miami's O-line. All I saw last year was Cam Ward running for his life rather routinely. How off am I?
I think there's a little bit of falsehood with that. You had to watch the games. ESPN, Fox, or anybody else, they're going to throw out there the plays that are wow plays where Cam made guys miss. And he took a lot of chances, willy-nilly with the ball in his hand. He's a little loose. But he was good at evading the rush when they screwed up. Just to give you an example, Maui Noah, the right tackle, he'll be a top 20 pick in the draft after this year probably. He gets a little handsy sometimes because he gets beat with speed rush. Sometimes that happens. He got like 5 penalties in the last 4 games or something to that effect, holdings and whatnot. There's going to be a few of those plays that get shown on the clips, but like they were pretty consistent other than against a handful of teams. Louisville could rush the passer. They had some plays in Dawson, and some of those guys got after him. Obviously, Georgia Tech, they played physical. They threw the kitchen sink at them. And then I don't know what happened in the Syracuse game because they didn't have a ton of defensive players. If you want to look at a game where they got laxed, the Miami O-line got laxed in that game because they were up 21-0 and lost. No excuse. They played down to their competition. That's more of a Mario problem, in my opinion, than it is a Cam Ward or O-line, but those are still the players. They were down 35-10 against Cal. Florida State beat Cal. It's the only Division I win they had.
I still don't get that.
Yeah, I know.
And shouldn't have. I mean, honestly, they shouldn't have beat Cal.
Cal had two possessions late in the game where they shot themselves in the foot with penalties and missed field goals.
Yeah. But Miami gave up 12. Markel Bell gave up 4 pressures against Cal. Francis Maunoa gave up 3 pressures against Cal. Yeah. And that's my thing, Brian.
Give them problems.
But there just weren't a lot of good athletes that they faced last year. That's a little bit of my concern. And if you look at his numbers at the end of the year, I mean, 19 pressures on the season is not that bad. 1 sack allowed, 1 hit allowed. But he gave up 3 pressures against Virginia Tech, 3 against Cal, 3 against Louisville, 4 against Duke. He didn't give any to Wake or Iowa State. Gave up a sack against Syracuse in that game. And to your point, it's like that's a little bit of my concern. And I think that the other concern I have is if I'm Notre Dame, I'm going after Markel Bell. I mean, they did everything but just hand him the left tackle job last year, and he couldn't hold it. And that's why he ended up rotating a lot with Jalen Rivers. Well, you don't have Jalen Rivers anymore to kind of bail you out. And Nez Cooper's another one. At times, Nez Cooper looks like a future NFL football player. And at other times, Nez Cooper looks like he can't block anybody.
Yep.
And it just, I think that's the thing about it is there is a certainly an inconsistency to it. Part of it too is that's also just Cam Ward's game. I mean, he's kind of sometimes looking to do that. But Florida, I mean, he sat back in the pocket, had all day to throw. I mean, they didn't put as much pressure on him as other people did. So I think that the thing is with Miami is they have a very good offensive line. They're a lot like Notre Dame's. Very good run blocking offensive line. Shaky pass blocking offensive line. And that's going to get tested for both teams in this matchup, not just Miami. Right. It's also a question mark still for Notre Dame's. Jacob Watson, if Notre Dame is beating Miami 24-10 at halftime, what are your thoughts? What did they do right? How do they finish? What do you need to personally see for you to think Notre Dame is a better team? Well, I think Notre Dame is a better team, and I don't think the better team always wins. I think Notre Dame is a better team than Northern Illinois on the whole. They just weren't that Saturday. But what are my thoughts if Notre Dame's up 24-10 at halftime? It tells me that Notre Dame's running the ball and hit a couple big plays. That's what I think is going to allow them to get to 24 points. It's they take advantage of a blown coverage and CJ gets a ball, or they get a one-on-one that they really like on the outside that they like, or Jeremiah Jadarian busts a big one, and which Notre Dame kind of did every game last year. I mean, what was crazy about the run game breakdown that I did, Brian, is Notre Dame last year, as I mentioned, if you look at Jadarian Price and you look at Jeremiah Love as running backs last year, Jeremiah Love averaged 7.1 yards per carry, and he was at 60.9 efficiency. Jadarian Price was at 7.5 yards per carry in the regular season, but he's only at 48.2 efficiency. And like they were a team that they're going to hit home runs. Like you could stop them. Florida State actually did a pretty good job of stopping Notre Dame's run game early last year. And all of a sudden, Jadarian off 65-yard touchdown. So
yeah,
they're going to get those. The question is, can you consistently run the ball on Miami? That's going to be
average 3.5 minimum on first down early in the game and get it to like 4.5 midpoint of the game. Notre Dame will be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah. But that's what it'll tell me. The 10 points I won't necessarily love, but it'll tell me that Miami probably put a drive together, maybe hit a big play as well. How do they finish? I would think that if Notre Dame jumped, Miami's. It's going to sound interesting to say this because Miami did have a couple big comebacks last year, but Miami's I don't think is a team that's built to come back against a team like Notre Dame. They can come back on Cal, they can come back on Virginia Tech. I don't know that they're a team that's built to come back on somebody that's on their level talent-wise. You're not going to do the things to Notre Dame that you did to Cal.
Yeah, if they get down 28-10 to Notre Dame or something, it's lights out. Notre Dame's secondary will clamp you down a lot anyway, right. And that means that Miami didn't come up with a scheme defensively to figure out CJ Carr. That game could get real ugly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Michael Lynch, will Stanford go 0-12 this year?
No, it will go 0-12. They'll win at least one game. That's just college football.
It's possible. There was 3 games on their schedule that you looked at and said, look, they got a shot, just matchup-wise, they got a shot to win that game, and they just lost maybe the second easiest game that they had on their schedule to Hawaii. And, you've got Boston College at home. You got San Jose State at home. Those could be a little tricky. Cal at home. They've got a pretty manageable schedule left of some games they can win. But if they don't make some changes, they're going to struggle to win some games. But here's the deal, guys. Last year, Stanford went 3-9. They were terrible last year. Yet they still beat Syracuse on the road and Louisville. 2 of the better teams they played all year. They beat a 10-win team and a 9-win team last year. And they were terrible last season.
Stanford's in a lot of trouble long term, by the way.
They're terrible. 2023, again, they were 3-9. But they beat Colorado on the road, who, that was a weird game. And then they beat Cam Ward and Washington State on the road. And then in 2022, Stanford also went 3-9, and they beat Notre Dame that year. So that's how it goes. But if there's any team in the Power 4 level that has a shot to go without a win this year, it's Stanford. Like there's some I'm watching Micah Ford run, and I'm like, dude, this guy's running hard, and he's averaging like 3-something yards a carry because he's like having to work for everything. He's making cuts 3 yards behind the line. He's running through guys. The receivers are slow. They can't get separation. Ben Goldbranson just refuses to throw the ball down the field.
Oof.
It was ugly. Ugly. It was a really bad game. Tom Frawley, do you expect to see – hey, Tom, how are you, man? Do you expect to see CJ to run more play action or RPO versus Miami? Will he be able to effectively run RPO or play action out of the shotgun if and when Miami loads the box? Yeah. Look, here's what I'm pretty confident we'll see early on from Notre Dame, because Mike Denbrock's a smart coach, and he's been here before. You're not going to see CJ Carr dropping back all game and 4 or 5 full, free release stuff straight in the pocket, just throwing the ball on intermediate and deep routes all game long. He's just not going to do that. There will be some plays like that, but you're going to see quick game. You're going to see screens. You're going to see some RPO action. You're going to see play action. You're going to see him doing some bootlegs in the game, especially if they're crashing hard off the edge. CJ throws the ball well on the run. You go back and watch the last couple blue gold games. CJ throws the ball very accurately on the run. And Brian, you did a breakdown recently on your Notre Dame recruiting channel where you broke down CJ Carr's game, and there's plenty of throws where CJ's on the move, keeping his eyes downfield, throwing the ball accurately down the field, something we have seen him do at Notre Dame in the spring games. So they're going to change the launch points for CJ Carr at times in this game. They're going to make his reads at times easier with an RPO or a quick game or a screen throw. And then that makes some of those other things more effective. But I'd be hard-pressed to predict that they're not going to see some run action from him because he's a good play-action thrower. And he's willing to take shots down the field. So I certainly think we'll see those things in this game. And for me, play action is straight play action. That's not the same as a bootleg. But I also think we'll see some boots and some maybe some nakeds mixed in there as well from CJ. But I just don't see a world unless Notre Dame just comes out and they're just cooking Miami right away with stuff. I just don't see a world where Mike Denbrock just drops them straight back the whole game on deep drops, throwing the ball down the field.
There's no need. Play action off those running backs. There's a lot of different variations of it, but you hit it. They're going to use that for sure.
Yep. Swan Dong says, who would you like to see in the national championship game this year besides Notre Dame?
I don't like any of the other teams. I mean, I like Notre Dame. So the answer is none of the above.
Well, let's say, Brian, that Notre Dame is in the title game. Who would you like to see them play?
Clemson, because I don't think their secondary is as good as advertised. I think their offense is going to be very good. I think it'd be a fun game. Dabo seems like a pretty good guy. And I'd like to see Notre Dame's offensive line go against Clemson's D-line.
I got Bama and I want to see Bama or Ohio State in the title game if Notre Dame's in there. If they're in there, that's why I'd like to see them play. Or unless they've beat one of those two teams on the way. Because as I've said before, I'm big into you've got to kind of slay some dragons. And right now they have not been able to beat Ohio State. They have not been able to beat Alabama since 1987. They've played two times against Bama since 87, lost both. They've played now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 times in the last 30 years against Ohio State. I've lost them all. I want to see them do something that they haven't done before. And I think beating one of those two teams would give me that. I predicted Notre Dame and Bama in the title game. My Final Four was Notre Dame, Texas, Bama, and Clemson was my Final Four prediction, Brian.
Trivia for you. How many starters do you think Bama has that are transfers this year? Of course, this could change, but how many do you think off the top of your head? This was a little surprising to me.
I think only 2 or 3.
For this year?
Yeah.
12.
12 starters that are transferred in this year?
Well, like just in totality, like at some point.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh.
That's not normal for Bama, but now the one caveat, some of those kids had connection to their West Coast.
Yeah, because like their center came over. I thought you were talking about like Isaiah Horton's from this year. You're talking like period transfers.
Right. That's still a lot for them because they recruit so well. I just wonder how it's going to mesh.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How many of those guys are returners, though? Because like you obviously had the corner that you got from USC last year, Jackson transferred in. He's now in year 2. You got Parker.
A lot of them are second years because they're LA kids and stuff. Yeah, you're right.
So
let me see here.
But to your point, Brian, if most of those guys, because other than Isaiah Horton, I honestly can't think of a. I'm trying to think of who guys were that transferred in this year.
Dewberry? Was he last year? Or this?
He's a first year transfer. He's a first year.
He might be the left guard.
Yeah, he's a first year transfer. He came in from A&M.
Yeah,
that's concerning because he couldn't hold on to their whole defense is returners. They have some guys that are in the 2 deep, Kelby Collins, Nakai Hill-Green. Yeah. But I think that, but to your point, Brian, that was part of the issue for them last year, in my opinion, was that they did have a lot of newer guys in their team last year. They were not a team last year.
Yeah, Brody Dalton might be a
tight end,
the H-back guy. That's not as important, but
yeah.
But I just thought that was interesting. This might be, if you're going to get Bama, need to do it this year.
I think last year was the year to do that. I could be off base.
Well, that to a certain degree, they didn't have the right quarterback at all.
I've been riding the Bama train for a while, Brian, just because I think getting Noah Grubbs. I keep on saying Noah Grubbs. That just gives him a little something that he needs. I think getting rid of some of the egos that were, hey, if it's not the way Nick Saban did it, I'm not listening. Just kind of be expected in year one. I think everybody that didn't want to be part of Kalen DeBoer's team is now gone, and everybody else is more bought in. And then all the transfers they brought in last year are now year two players. And I think that's impactful in my opinion. So we'll see how it plays out. But it's going to be interesting. Let's do the last couple here, Brian. From Tom Frawley's got two. He says, do you expect Keontae Scott to cover Greathouse when their corners shade the boundary receiver like Malachi Fields? You were talking about this earlier, Brian, so I'll let you have a go at this one.
Let's be really blunt. I live in Auburn. Keontae played for the Tigers last year, and he's a solid player. They moved him around to like outside corner. He sucked at it. He's not a great tackler, et cetera, but he physically gifted. But he struggled last year at times. Now, the SEC, there's no friendlies. There's no friendlies in terms of guys you're covering. But he's not a consistent player. He gets outside his technique. Even Cal got him a few times. At one point in that game last year, Cal was 7 for 8 on third downs. Keontae was part of the problem. I don't think he's going to be able to hold Jaden Greathouse consistently in check. My question is, how do they handle that over the top? Are they going to get help? It's hard to put, and I'll let you explain this. It's hard to do without a chalkboard up there. Shading somebody to the slot, which I expect Greathouse to get 60% of his snaps or more from the slot, more than outside. But I think he's going to do most of his work there. I think that's the biggest matchup. And I said, number one reason I think Notre Dame can win is that matchup. He's not very good, in my opinion, and he's not an NFL player like Greathouse. That's somewhere that Notre Dame can eat.
He's going to be matched up against Greathouse and Will Pauling, and they both have to make plays in this game.
100%.
They just do. If Miami does what he did last year, I think there's also some opportunities to get some quick game to the perimeter and then make Miami's DBs come up and tackle. I think that's going to be a part of this as well. That there's going to have to be some after the catch action being done against this Miami defense. Tristan Shoup says, when you evaluate this Notre Dame O-line later this season, what things will you look for when determining if they have improved or not? Not just looking at stats, but things like footwork and leverage. I think a lot of it, I mean, the stats will reflect improvements in pass pro, and it really comes down to a couple things. Number one is some of the issues that Notre Dame had last year in pass pro had nothing to do with footwork and leverage. It had to do with they didn't know who to block. I mean, they're just letting guys run. I mean, just in quick game, Brian, in quick game. Like I keep saying that if you're not a football coach, I don't know that you understand how bad it is to allow run-throughs from first-level players in quick game. Like, I mean, that's the whole point of quick game is just block the first level. You're not worried about blocking linebackers. If he's going to come off the edge as a linebacker, you throw it around him or behind him or whatever. You're letting linemen run through in quick game. And it happened multiple times last year. It was maddening. Like, that's just like that. I'd be annoyed by that if I was watching it at a high school football game. I'd be like, dude, how do you not know how to block quick game? You're just doing slides. What is going on right now? It's just assignment correctness. I want to see Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner, especially Emil Wagner, be more consistent with his footwork and his just sinking his hips. Emil sometimes gets a little bit in front of himself. He loses the leverage. He'll kind of start leaning. He'll like punch early, loses all base, and that's when people can chuck him. At times, Emil will pass set, but he's kind of on his heels, and guys will just get in him and ride him right into the quarterback. He's got to do a better job of being patient as a pass blocker, not overextending himself. But then when he gets that power bull rush, being able to better not just physically handle it, but also technically handle, we just dig your heels in and you just kind of hold up against that guy. And then with Anthony Knapp, it's just showing more comfort in space. I mean, he was not comfortable blocking on the edge last year. And blocking at tackle is a lot different than blocking at guard. At guard, it gets on you quick. It's mano a mano. There's a lot more stuff going on the edge, a lot more space, a lot more time where you're sinking where the guy's still making his moves. It's just about showing comfort on the second level and then just, like I said, having a better sense of who's coming and knowing when to pick it up. My biggest fear with pass pro isn't that just Anthony Knapp gets whooped all game by Reuben Bain. I mean, that could happen. That'd be concerning. But I watched this guy go toe-to-toe with Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart and hold his own for the most part physically last year. it's more so like, oh, they didn't recognize that corner fire, and he just drilled CJ in the head, and the ball goes flying, and they recovered a fumble. Miami recovers a fumble. That's more of what I'm concerned about. They didn't, see that Will linebacker coming from the backside. Nobody picked it up, and CJ gets drilled. That's the stuff that I'm more concerned about than just Ruben Bain, beating him 8 times and getting 3 sacks just by dominating him. I mean, we've seen him go. Ruben Bain's a heck of a player. It's not like we didn't see Anthony Knapp go against a pretty good defensive ends last year. And that never happened to him for an entire game. But it's the run-throughs, the just flat, you just didn't touch that guy, and then just them not knowing who to block. Those are as a quarterback, Brian, those are the ones that concern you, because that's when fumbles happen. When a guy beats a guy late and you can prepare for it and just take the sack, it's when a guy just comes screaming off the edge, nobody touches him, and you're right here, and boom, he hits you in the back, ball goes flying in the air. Like, just go ask Gunnar Stockton what that's like.
Good example.
Yeah. All right, last one from Tom Frawley. Brian, I'm hearing about the upgrade with our place kickers, Eric Schmidt and Noah Burnett. What say you, Coach? James Rendell appears to have found consistency. Will he be a weapon this season? Hey, Tom, I'm in a I gotta see it mode. And as far as upgrading kicker, it depends on what we're talking about. Are we talking about game 1 and playoff version of Mitch Jeter? That's a very different version of Mitch Jeter than got injured against Northern Illinois, was never the same in the regular season, and they're kicking less than 50%. I fully expect the place kicking to be better than it was in the regular season. That's not hard. That's not hard at all. They were sub 50%. The question is, can they be as good as what Mitch Jeter was before the injury and when he recovered? Because that clutch Mitch Jeter, like the one that hit the 40-something yard field goal to beat Texas, to put the A&M game away, are we talking about the Mitch Jeter that kicked a walk-off field goal against Penn State? Like that Mitch Jeter that was a 90+% field goal kicker in 2 years in the SEC? They're not going to be better than that version of Mitch Jeter. Unfortunately, Notre Dame only got that version of Mitch Jeter for 3 games last year because of injuries. So that one, I don't know that they'll be better than. The other one, the regular season version, they'll be better than that, but that's not saying a whole lot. They can make 51% of their kicks in the regular season, which is terrible. Still rank last in college football and be better than they were last year. With James Rendell, again, he's got the tools to be a really excellent punter. It's just I need to see him put it all together. That when it comes to kicking game, Brian, I need to see it. That's where I'm at. I got to see it.
Yeah. I don't trust kickers. I don't talk about kickers. I just hope it works out for the best. That's it.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Brian, I appreciate it, man. We're going to have you back on here probably during the bye week. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting. We'll look over at the visit list for the A&M game. So we'll have you on for that. So you guys will see Brian again. Before we head out of here, Brian, why don't you tell people where they can find your I know you still have the Portal podcast, but then also you've got a new Notre Dame recruiting podcast as well. So why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, sure.
We'll see you again soon.
Yeah, the Irish Recruiting Podcast is literally what it's called. Irish Recruiting Podcast. It's on YouTube. I haven't even started up the audio yet. I've only been doing it for about a week, a little less. And it's going to focus on Notre Dame from a recruiting and transfer portal perspective, do breakdowns of teams they play, who those guys are you got to watch out for if I saw them in high school. So it's a little different. I travel a lot to see high school games. It's my favorite thing to do. So check out the Irish Recruiting Podcast.
So that'll do it for Brian. And Brian, thank you, Chris Zorich, for coming on the show today, folks. Remember, it's the Mini Clover is where you can find his housing experience, where you can go, you can get helmet, jersey, all types of cool memorabilia, and also more importantly, which I think is more important than the helmet and the jersey, is getting a chance to sit down and talk football with Chris. Great guy. Appreciate him being on the show today. Trevor and I will be back tomorrow at 1:00 as we really launch into the specific matchup breakdowns of Notre Dame against Miami. It's going to be a really fun week, Brian. It's been a kind of a long off season, but it is finally here. Game week is finally here. Folks, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We have a ton of great stuff planned for you this week, and a lot of stuff that's going to be message board only, including our Upon Further Review show, which will now be just for message board subscribers only. So you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I want to thank FanDuel for partnering with us this year. As you guys can see up there, we're going to have a lot of fun talking about them this season. And Trevor and Vince will be back Thursday night, 8 o'clock on CFB Nation. So make sure you're subscribed there, doing their spread option show where they will be looking at all the best odds and all the best games. And they're going to be talking about this game as well. And there's going to be some fun game first week, week 1 games that they're going to talk about. So make sure you check those guys out at CFB Nation. I thought the first show was awesome, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do when they actually have some better games to talk about here this weekend. So you're going to want to check that out. So make sure you're not only subscribed to Irish Breakdown, but also subscribe to the CFB Nation channel. For Brian, I'm Brian. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you in here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.